Two school children were walking home. One of them was telling his friend that he had finished his homework quickly, and it seemed to him that time was passing slowly. Along the road, there were huge military vehicles with young guys sitting inside. They were talking calmly about something and looked completely relaxed. The crowd of girls, noticing them, began to whisper enthusiastically, discussing how cool they were. One of the guys was surprised why everyone was reacting like that. After all, they are not even hunters, but simply students of a specialized school. However, his classmate reminded him that they were wearing the logo of the School of Heroes. The apocalypse began suddenly without any warning signs. The sky turned red and magical portals began to appear in it, from which dragons flew out. One of them, like the owner, sat on the roof of a huge building and watched the frightened people rushing about below. Later, scientists discovered that there was a world similar to Earth in space. Due to the catastrophe, this world was shattered into pieces, and its debris in the form of meteorites fell on our planet. These fragments began to merge with the surrounding environment, changing it. People did not understand what was happening, but later this phenomenon was called the confluence. As a result, a giant tree appeared on Earth. The natural laws of another world became part of the Earth. Various monsters appeared, and about 17% of the planet's surface was changed. Humanity has lost control over these territories. A huge monster grabbed the dead warrior by the head. At that time, a soldier was hiding behind the wall trying to catch his breath. He watched in horror as the monster continued to walk towards him, still holding the soldier's body. Such dangerous areas with monsters became known as dungeons. One of the monsters, a horned horror, lived there. It was distinguished by high muscular strength and endurance, but was not particularly agile. The monster suddenly went berserk, opened its mouth and prepared to attack. The guy hiding behind the wall instantly came out of hiding, took out his weapon, and began a counterattack. The monster with glowing eyes did not react to the shelling and rushed straight towards him without receiving any wounds. It ran up to the man and hit him hard in the stomach. He flew away, crashing into the wall with a loud bang. Even outstanding theoretical knowledge and training were not enough. The man was just a man, albeit trained, but with lower levels of agility and strength. Barely able to stand on his feet, he saw a maliciously smiling creature in front of him. The man immediately intercepted the monster's fist before he could strike. But, fortunately, the invasion from another world brought not only disasters, the innate limitations of man have been violated. The guy activated his power and was able to dodge the blow. The potential boundaries laid down by the nature of the earth no longer existed. He grabbed the monster by the arm, threw him over himself and slammed him hard into the ground. Then he watched him silently. These changes affected all Earthlings. The guy looked at his hands, realizing that now each person had their own unique skill. Some stood out for their abilities. Through training and conditioning, people have learned to use their full potential. In the past, an army of horned, muscular monsters followed their leader. To reclaim the dungeon zones, humans created elite troops. These fighters began to call themselves hunters. When monsters attacked the battlefield, people immediately grabbed their weapons, preparing to fight back. Thus began the era of dungeons and hunters. Together they were able to destroy a huge number of monsters and, observing the destroyed city, discussed what was happening. The world shook from their strength and achievements. Even before a single human generation had passed, specialized schools began to appear where future hunters were trained. The best educational institutions were considered to be those that had been producing successful fighters for 25 years. One of these institutions was the Hero High School, which became famous throughout the world. The students discussed how hunters take exams in the dungeons. They wondered if they were given official permission to do so and what happens if someone dies inside. However, they were confident that since they had entered such a school, it meant that they possessed outstanding abilities. At this time, other schoolgirls were enthusiastically discussing the handsome men. One of them, a half-elf from the School of Heroes, was riding on the roof of a car. He was on a completely different level, and the girls were delighted. One of the guys wondered who it was, but the other reminded him that he was on TV. It was Choi Diav, the son of a famous hunter and an elf. They said he was a genius, and that within 5 years of graduation he would be among the top 5 strongest hunters in the world. The guys couldn't understand why girls were going crazy over him. After all, he wasn't an idol. One of the school children remembered that his friend had a part-time job today, and another invited everyone to karaoke. However, Charyong apologized and refused to go, saying that they should have fun without him. Classmates were surprised why he continued to work immediately after exams and did not miss even one day. However, after receiving a playful blow to the back from a friend, he only silently accepted what was happening. Charyung said goodbye and promised that they would see each other next week. One of the friends reminded the other to be careful with what he said, because they knew how stubborn Charyung was. They recalled him sitting in a hospital room next to an old man. Soon, Cha received a message about unpaid hospital bills for May and June, asking him to make payments on behalf of the patient. Almost immediately after this, he received a message from his manager asking him to come to work. A new order had arrived. At the same time, the blonde half-elf waved his hand towards the girls, causing them to scream happily. But he suddenly noticed Charyung walking on the sidewalk. The half-elf's companion asked if this was the same guy. But the blonde replied that it just seemed that way. Meanwhile, Charyung was thinking about how he didn't want to work. He entered the underground tunnel, pushing aside the prohibitory tape. And I saw that there was already someone inside. They called out to him and introduced him to the customer, who turned out to be his broker, Hwan. The guy started to say hello, but was interrupted by the customer's shout. He was indignant. They promised to show him the most capable fighter. Hwan confirmed that Charyung is the most capable one. However, the customer became furious, declaring that he was not going to do charity work and called him names. And he demanded that this boy be removed and that a normal man be brought in. Otherwise, he would turn both of them into invalids right there on the spot. Charyung turned his attention to the guard and asked if he was a hunter. At first he doubted it, but then he realized he really was a hunter and worked for that bald guy. The customer was shocked by such audacity and demanded an explanation. His bodyguard, Lee Pil-gyu, suggested not to talk, but simply break Charyung's arms and legs so that he himself would understand what he had done wrong. The customer approved this decision and emphasized that he knew how to deal with such boys. He stated that if Charyung valued his life, he should immediately ask for forgiveness. However, the guy himself admitted that the situation is unpleasant and even expensive. Charyung is a dungeon smuggler who participates in raids illegally. Underground smuggling and related crimes have become a serious threat to the entire world. Despite this, hunters continue to make every effort to protect the dungeons from monsters. In case of successful clearing and destruction of monsters, they receive a generous reward. However, before taking the treasures out of the dungeon, hunters must pass a test. Some artifacts have incredible power, and their removal without official permission can lead to catastrophic consequences. Such fines are subject to mandatory registration with the Hunters Association, where the appropriate taxes are also withheld from them. However, there are those who violate these rules. They persuade hunters who do not want to pay high taxes, and they secretly take out treasures, bypassing control. If such people are not stopped in time, chaos may occur in society. Therefore, citizens are urged to be attentive, and if violators are discovered, immediately report them to the association. At this time, the customer approached Hwan, asking if he really did not intend to interfere in the fight between the guard and Charyung. The broker calmly replied that it was not Charyung who should be worried, but the one who was against him. The security guard is an extremely irritable person, and in the past he was fired not because of an injury but because he beat up a colleague. Age didn't matter to him, and he had already had to dispose of bodies more than once. Charyung noted that attacking a colleague is a serious crime, which means that his opponent is truly dangerous. Lee Pil-gyu justified himself by saying that his colleague was just a nuisance that he got rid of. Charyung was at a loss at first, but he quickly realized that the security guard had deliberately done the wrong thing. Once he was able to lose his license and get rid of a competitor, he mocked him and in return received a powerful blow of turquoise energy to the face. However, Charyung easily avoided the blow by simply tilting his head, and he calmly stated that he was not facing such a formidable opponent. This angered Pil-gyu, and he attacked with renewed vigor. In response, Charyung delivered a light kick straight to his opponent's face. Pil-gyu was stunned, not expecting to receive a boot to the face. Hwan only confirmed that he did not lie. They really have the most capable guy in front of them. Charyung noted that with such an appearance, Pil-gyu should have been more resilient. The guard, who expected to see an ordinary boy, was shocked. His opponent had the reflexes and striking power of a true professional. Hwan noticed that it was now clear to the customer that Charyung was not someone who could be easily defeated. The customer admitted that the young man's blows were strong and wondered how he managed to achieve such strength. He tried to remember what Pil-gyu used to be like, but the man next to him stopped him, saying that he already understood everything. The guard, beside himself with rage, tore off his shirt, and it became clear that in the past he had been a tank. Hwan simply advised the customer not to look at him with such surprise, explaining that he simply had good intuition. Pil-gyu, seeing that Cha-ryung had mastered several techniques, still thought of him as just a smuggler. However, he was determined to demonstrate what real strength was. After the merger, humans gained abilities beyond previous human capabilities. They all differed not only in their physique, but also in their skills. Abilities varied from person to person, and hunters developed their skills based on their individual abilities. Each of them played their own unique role in the fight against the threat from the dungeons. Cha-ryung stood there, looking at his opponent in amazement. In front of him was a real tank, one of the hunter specializations, possessing the enhancement technique known as Steel Skin and Giant's Majesty. This is the power that Pil-gyu was using now. His body suddenly increased in size, his veins bulged, his muscles filled with power. He became several times stronger. Tanks are fighters who protect their allies in dungeons. They go first, taking the blows of the monsters on themselves. Their bodies are so hardened and resilient that they can even withstand bullet shots. And the best of them are capable of absorbing missile strikes of any power, turning into a real human shield. Such strength was the strength of a true hunter. Pil-gyu raised his hands, then brought them down on the ground. The impact was so powerful that the concrete underneath cracked and crumbled, and the powerful shockwave almost knocked the customer off his feet. It was only thanks to Im Jae-hwan's quick reaction that he was able to be restrained. He noted that everything that was happening was real hooliganism. After all, the security guard actually destroyed their work premises. Cha-ryung was emitting blue magical energy as he stood there, breathing heavily, barely dodging the powerful attacks. He underestimated his opponent. Pil-gyu watched him with a grin, believing that the young man was no longer capable of showing strength. However, Cha-ryung was cautious, and he was in no hurry to enter into an open fight, not wanting to fall into a trap. Im Jae-hwan watched the battle and assessed the destructive power, and he compared it to being hit by an average-sized truck. Such a blow could easily shatter bones. He shouted at Cha-ryung to finish the fight quickly. Otherwise, the damage from the destruction will be deducted from his salary. Pil-gyu noted ironically that his boss still doesn't understand who is in front of him. He suggested that Cha-ryung surrender himself, and he admitted his inability to get past a real professional. He just nodded and picked up the metal pipe. At this moment, his opponent was already flying towards him, emitting bright energy, and his eyes were burning with fury. People have long been accustomed to considering tanks invincible due to their physical endurance and resilience. However, even they have weaknesses, and the broker watching the fight understood that everything was coming to an end. Tanks were not invincible. There were opponents who could defeat them. These were fighters who concentrated destructive force in one point. Their skill, precision attacks, and precise control could exceed the strength of even the most powerful tanks. The decisive clash took place. An explosion of blue flame swept across the arena. Cha-ryung unleashed a series of strikes, culminating in a destructive wave. Pil-gyu couldn't move. His body was paralyzed. The color disappeared from his eyes and blood came out of his mouth. Im Jae-hwan stood calmly, smoking a cigarette, and the customer was completely shocked by what he saw. His guard collapsed under the pressure, and Pil-gyu could hardly comprehend that he had destroyed his own defense in vain. And he wondered where Cha-ryung could have learned such a complex spinning technique. The young man just shrugged his shoulders, claiming that he didn't even know what they were talking about. However, a thought flashed through Pil-gyu's mind. Perhaps he had seen this before. 7. He became increasingly convinced that this technique belonged to the man he had heard about, Cha-ryung's father. When Cha-ryung was little, he would walk quietly down the hallway of his house. At that time, his father was the best hunter. The boy found the right door, opened it, and looked out into the street with delight. His father stood in the yard holding a spear in his hands. His name was Yusong. He belonged to the first generation of hunters, those who became the foundation of the hunting world. For those who did not experience that horror personally, these people were legends who had entered history. But in reality, that time could be called hell for hunters. There wasn't enough information about the dungeons. No one could even imagine what kind of monsters lived there. In the caves, hunters encountered monsters. For example, the Ekon Mulis, a creature resembling a scorpion with a thick tail and mouth. Today, such monsters do not seem particularly dangerous, but back then, everything was different. The gecko Mulis released green steam from its mouth, a poisonous attack. This caused an explosion from which not everyone managed to escape. For hunters of that time, such creatures were comparable to an unknown disaster. One of the men, taking a weapon similar to an axe, tried to kill the monster. But the hunters had neither the appropriate skills nor reliable equipment. His corrosion-resistant titanium weapon instantly melted from the green smoke. The monster's tail continued to emit poisonous gases. The man then grabbed the remaining object and rushed towards the mouth. His body was ablaze with magic and he struck. The first generation of hunters risked their lives, using trial and error. At that moment, 3 people appeared at the entrance to the cave. They stood there, out of breath, with an expression of fear on their faces. In front of them lay a dead monster, pierced through and through, and next to it sat a man. Those who survived gained experience and passed it on to the next generations. In the end, they became heroes. Now this man, covered in scars and blood, has grown up. It was Cha Ryung's father, the one who was called the Dragon Slayer. He sat on a dead giant dragon and held a spear. This nickname was given to the man who was the first among people to kill a dragon. He was admired and was the #1 hunter in Asia. Now he was training in the yard, using a spear and blue magic. One blow and its force swept across the yard in circles. Cha Ryung respected and envied his father the most. But suddenly blood fell on the stone. The boy believed that his father was invincible, but now he stood in complete shock. The man's nose started bleeding. The worried boy rushed towards him, but his father stopped him with a gesture. The cause of the illness turned out to be poison. The boy stood in tears, not daring to come closer. While hunting in the dungeon, the father was poisoned. It was impossible to heal him. Now he was in the hospital. He, as always, tried to overcome this difficulty, but he no longer had enough strength. When his son was not around, he began to spit blood. Over all these years, his physical condition had reached its limit. Some colleagues, for whom my father had once risked his life, came to visit him. They gave him some papers to sign and then left, exchanging glances with a sly grin. These people took advantage of his illness and appropriated both his achievements and property. The father's physical and mental suffering continued for several years. As Cha Ryung grew older, he began to visit his father after school. Time passed, and the world began to forget the name of the Dragon Slayer. It was no longer possible to recognize him as the former hero. He lost everything he had and suffered from an incurable disease. Now he was just a forgotten hero. Cha Ryung, having defeated his opponent, silently left him. And then he threw away the iron pipe. MJ told the man standing next to him that it was not difficult. The customer was shocked. His security guard lost to some young guy. MJ explained that the guard simply wasn't a good hunter. He noted that a person who boasts about beating up his own colleague can immediately determine his low level. Cha Ryung said there are only 2 reasons why good hunters leave. Either they are physically unable to continue working due to injuries, or they die during a raid. He didn't know how much the man was making, but if his salary was above minimum wage, he should be fired. If he works only for profit, then anyone can do such work. MJ placed his hand on the customer's shoulder, and he reminded that the fee for the service should be doubled. The customer was angry at first, not understanding what this was all about. But in the end, he agreed, realizing that he himself had started this conflict. He admitted that they don't do anything for free. Meanwhile, Cha Ryung was approached. The broker asked him if he had heard of the Celestial Wasp. The boy was shocked. Would he really have to fight her? It seemed too much. The Sky Wasp is a monster recognized as the most dangerous, not only on the Korean peninsula, but in the entire world. The old Uido area, where her nest is located, has become the highest danger zone in Korea. Even rankers have a hard time dealing with one individual, and there's a whole army of them. For a smuggler, you can consider that there is simply no chance, especially if we are talking about a person with a white rank. According to rumors, a major raid took place the day before, which was not reported in the media. The state provided military support and assembled a team of 7 white-ranked hunters. These were real Korean stars. Although usually their mere appearance causes a stir in the press, this time everything happened in secret. Their goal was to destroy the Celestial Wasp. The attempt failed, but they reportedly managed to organize a hunt for the queen. One of the hunters appropriated the royal jelly of the heavenly wasps. He persuaded a member of the special squad and secretly took this item out. MJ explained that royal jelly is a special nutrient that wasps feed to the new queen. The guy was surprised. Could it be that a white-ranked hunter had taken up smuggling because of some nutrient? Sky Wasp's royal jelly has appeared before. The one who ate it was able to literally escape from the embrace of death and return to life. This amazed Cha Ryung. All the nooks and crannies leading to the dungeons must be under strict control. This is the official position of the Hunters Association and the government. But, as often happens, in reality everything is different. MJ Huan stood in front of the massive metal doors covered in hieroglyphs written in something red. He activated the magic power in his hand and touched the door. A magical impulse immediately passed through the entire perimeter, and the hieroglyphs began to disappear. He reminded his partner to be especially careful. After all, now it is especially important not to die. After that, he lit a cigarette and blew smoke straight into Cha Ryong's face, which surprised him. The guy sped up next to him, asking in surprise what he was doing. The broker explained that he noticed that his partner seemed distracted, as if he was thinking about something else and was not responding. He was apparently haunted by the talk of a potion that could bring a dead person back to life. Cha Ryong replied that it didn't matter to him. Obviously, this is all an exaggeration. Even if such a cure really exists, it still won't be able to cure his father. As he opened the giant doors, he dreamed of at least some way to help him. After all, if such a possibility had existed, the father would not have lost his last hope. He went outside and stopped on a rock. Shielding his face from the sun with his hand, the boy looked into the distance. After the conflux, dungeons began to appear on Earth. In Korea, several of the largest stood out. The first was where Jeju Island merged with the hot rocky region. The second was formed by the merger of the Igara jungle with the Yedo area of Seoul in the old Boromai area. This dungeon was considered low-level, but it covered a huge area. At its center were the districts of Yedo, Mapo, and Yongsan. This place has not been reliably protected until now, and many hunters have lost their lives there. One of the smuggler's men delivered the goods to the meeting point. However, contact with him was lost as soon as he arrived there. He was wounded, got into trouble, left behind traces of blood and disappeared with the goods. MJ guessed that he was most likely injured by the sky wasps during his escape. Now, Cha Ryung's job is to check the scene and, if the goods are still there, return them. He also urged his partner to stop being distracted by extraneous thoughts and focus on work. Cha Ryung asked what would happen if Cha betrayed him, but was assured that he was not stupid enough to run away with such a dangerous item. However, extreme caution must be exercised, as Sky Wasp Royal Jelly is an extremely valuable resource that is sought after by more than just humans. Cha Ryung landed in a dense forest. This entire forest is probably already filled with a smell that could attract monsters. Nearby, he noticed a huge footprint, which clearly did not bode well. At the same time, a woman was running through the forest. She hid behind a tree and bit her hand to keep from making sounds. It was Jin Se-ram, a student at Hero High School. She thought that the midterm exams for the second semester would be easy. Something terrible suddenly appeared in front of the girl, a giant monster that should not have been in this area. Seeing him, she immediately looked away, closed her eyes, and froze in place. She didn't understand what was happening. The exam was supposed to be fairly easy. Participants had to collect as many coins as possible, hidden in different corners of the dungeon. It was a practical exam with a low level of difficulty. The place was considered a safe training area, a hunting ground for beginners. However, the monster moved the tree aside and discovered the girl. She was shocked. Usually the monsters in this zone were weak and had almost no intelligence. And now in front of her stood a huge creature with 4 arms. She decided to run, but she understood that there was almost no chance of salvation. Only a miracle could help. The girl took out a bow, pulled the string with 3 arrows, and took aim. Despite everything, she decided to fight, even when faced with a titan ape, a high-threat creature. She released the arrows and they whistled towards the monster. He covered his face with his hand, and the arrows that hit it did not cause any damage. His skin was stronger than armor. The monster approached her and hit the ground with all his might. The impact caused the ground to crack and the girl flew to the side. She grabbed the bow again, realizing that it would not be pierced by regular shots. The girl fired 3 more arrows. They hit the monster's chest but simply got stuck in the skin, causing no harm. The attacks had no effect at all. The monster didn't even try to dodge or block the blows. Then she decided to get closer to attack a less protected place. Suddenly, fire magic activated around her. The girl could use magic by applying it to arrowheads. She was a mage archer and used the fire barrage technique. The magic she could put into arrows was varied and had virtually no limits. In order to win, she chose an explosive attack type, putting maximum strength and energy into it. Such a blow could cause serious damage even to a monster with a 3-star danger level. But the giant suddenly jumped onto a tree, dodging the attack. The magic only worked if it hit the target accurately. The girl was shocked. How could he dodge before she even fired? She would not get a second chance like this, and so she decided to flee. The monster jumped down from the tree and rushed after her, stretching out his hand to grab her. The girl ran with all her might. horror written all over her face. Suddenly, a blue beam from the sky hit the monster. It was Chaoryong. He appeared at the last moment and struck the monster with his weapon. The girl looked at him in amazement, standing in the sky. He had just saved her life. The blow was strong enough to damage the monster's jaw. The guy standing on the tree noted that the blow hit the monster right on the chin. Chaoryong took off his mask to make it easier for him to breathe, but he quickly realized that this was not enough. The monster raised its head and began to look at him with frightening determination. Then he took out an unknown instrument that looked like a gun. And without hesitation, with determination in his eyes, he jumped down, heading for the second attack. A girl watched everything that was happening. She was amazed. The boy was going to fight the monster face to face. It seemed impossible. After all, he could die. Chaoryong flew up to the monster almost point blank and, before attacking, shouted at the girl to close her eyes. The monster raised his fists, preparing to strike. But Chaoryong had already pointed the gun straight at him, closed his eyes, and pulled the trigger. A huge beam of light, blindingly bright, swept across part of the forest. The girl instinctively closed her eyes, unable to withstand such a blinding radiance. The monster did not understand what was happening and found himself under the full influence of the beam. He went blind. Chaoryong landed nearby. He felt sad. He had used up all his supplies since he had used the last one. It was a stun torch, a rare instrument made from the scales of a deep-sea fish. Despite its high price, its ability to temporarily incapacitate an opponent has made it a favorite weapon of many hunters. However, due to frequent cases of improper use, leading to loss of vision, the manufacture and use of such devices is currently considered illegal. At this time, the girl began to come to her senses, blinking, and Chaoryong addressed her. He said that he helped her, but from now on everyone must rely only on themselves. There were only a few seconds left before the end of the exam. Whatever was happening inside the dungeon, it was important not to be seen by other hunters. He did not fight or interfere with anyone. MJ's words, smoking and comparing such people to cockroaches, came to mind. He said that smugglers make good money, but if they get involved in everything, they might get crushed one day. Suddenly, Chaoryong was distracted by something behind him and turned around. He saw the girl running after him. She hurried, breathing heavily, completely out of breath, suddenly noticing that her savior had disappeared. She couldn't understand where he had gone, because he had just been ahead. And then something hit her in the side. She screamed, and the next moment she found herself pinned to the ground. They pointed a gun at her and demanded to know who she was. It was Chaoryong. Jinsei Ram explained that he had saved her, and she wanted to thank him. But Chaoryong took this with suspicion. He didn't believe in such intentions. The girl replied that she knew who he really was, a smuggler, and that's why he wants to hire him for money. The guy's attention was drawn to the sign on the girl's t-shirt. The guy exhaled tiredly. He immediately stated that he was not going to help her a third time. He wasn't interested in how crazy these rich students from the School of Heroes were. Moreover, he threatened that if she continued to hang around, he would bury her. As he was leaving, the girl reminded him that the reward for informing on a smuggler was 50 million won, and for his capture, about 450 million. The boy, hearing this, turned around in anger to answer. But then he noticed an amulet in her hand called Blood of Enkel. She added that even if you take 5 people like him prisoner, it would still not be enough to buy this thing. She said it was an advance, and if he helped her pass the exam, she would pay the rest. The guy was shocked, deciding that she had completely gone crazy. He thought that she was just the daughter of rich parents, but now he realized that she was truly reckless. Jinsei Ram asked if it really mattered. After all, now he had a chance to completely change his life. Chaoryong let out a tired sigh, admitting that he had guessed from the very beginning that things would go exactly like this. The girl herself is to blame, although he had no reason to kill her. She didn't understand what he was talking about, and he reminded her that he had said earlier they only had a few seconds left. At that moment, the monster had already risen and was rushing straight towards them. He fell to the ground with a thud and hit his head on the floor. As a result of the blow, both of them flew to the sides and the weapon fell into the girl's hands. Chaoryong said he didn't give it to her just for her to stand there. Since she had already attacked with this weapon, she should use it now, put magic into the tip of the pole and throw it again. Jinsei Ram stopped him, saying that she had no more magic left. The guy responded sharply that it was her problem and she had to solve it somehow. He won't last long empty-handed. The girl squeezed the pole in her hands, concentrating the rest of her strength. She only had a quarter of her magical energy left. With such weak power, it seemed impossible to harm the monster. Then she decided that while the guy was distracting the monster, she should try to escape alone. But in the end, she threw a pole filled with magic and the guy caught it. She breathed heavily and told herself that she must have gone crazy. Young dodged the monster's attack and glanced at the pole. Having said that, I was disappointed. This time the magic was even weaker than before, less than a quarter of its former strength. However, this was enough. There is a well-known rule in Hero High School. In a battle with a monster, the main thing is not only destructive power, and the right moment and feeling allow you to hit the target exactly. Young's eyes were burning. He was ready to deliver the decisive blow. The boy struck the monster's head with a magical weapon. An explosion thundered. A chip formed where the monster's neck had been and began to melt. Every real hunter should have these feelings and skills. Little Jin Si-rin ran home with her friends after school. Suddenly she saw a car and a man in a suit nearby. The girl said goodbye to her friends and ran away. As she got into the car, she heard her friends saying that she was very lucky and had everything she wanted. In fact, that's what happened. The car started moving and they drove away. She could get almost anything that caught her eye. The fourth largest company in South Korea's business community is the Chinsen Group. The heir of this company married an elf, a representative of a tribe from another world. In this marriage, Jin Si-rom was born. Since childhood, she passionately wanted to become a huntress. While driving in the car, she pressed herself against the glass and looked at the hunters. After all, this was her cherished dream. But when she grew up, her coach said that she wouldn't be able to do it. There was too little elven blood in her. She was practically no different from ordinary people. However, her father did not stop her, but on the contrary, supported her. He said that he did not encourage her, but supported her. This is the path that his daughter chose. At that time, he was the head of the special development department at the company. He believed that in order to become a hunter, it was not necessary to have the abilities of elves. The coach agreed, but added that such abilities would not be superfluous. However, the girl was not much superior to the average teenager. The coach decided to clarify one detail with her father. He reminded her that his daughter was not quite an ordinary person, so she certainly won't give up just like that. He noted that she was very similar to his sister in her stubbornness. Although humans cannot compare to elves, even if they die in battle with monsters and then resurrect. If a girl tries her best, she has a chance. Perhaps she will achieve at least an average level. For an ordinary person, even such words are already praise and recognition. Jin Se-ram was born with almost everything except abilities. She had wealth, fame, and genes, all of which could instantly devalue her efforts and make her a laughingstock. She might even become an outcast. But she won't be able to stand this kind of treatment for long. After all, abilities don't just fall from the sky. An explosion occurs. Young manages to jump away from the scene. The Titan monster lies unconscious, with its neck melted and teeth knocked out. The guy stands calmly nearby and holds his weapon. Not far away, he notices Jin Si-rom, who looks at him in surprise. She can't believe what's happening. After all, they are about the same age. The guy remembers his broker telling him to be careful with one thing, so as not to break it, because it is very expensive. Young holds the glasses in her hands and can't believe their value, because they can be purchased for only 5,000 won. The guy's broker replied that this was not true. The glasses had more than 4 types of magic. Interference in facial recognition and voice changes. Now that the glasses were broken, his identity was revealed. The guy grabbed his head, thinking about how unlucky he was today. The girl approached him and asked if he by any chance studied at the same school as her. The guy turned to her, not understanding what she was talking about, and called her words nonsense. Irritation appeared on his face. He demanded from the girl what she promised and ordered her to give it to him right now. Jin Si-rom calmly extended her hand to him with the promised necklace. The guy immediately snatched it away, calling her a rich kid. He began to examine the necklace in the sun to make sure it was not a fake. And then he heard the girl ask if he needed money. She understood that not only in their school, but in any educational institution that trains future hunters, the tuition fees are not small. She wanted to offer help, but the guy replied that he didn't go to such places. While the girl did not understand why he said this, the guy added that she had addressed the wrong person. He doesn't go to a hunting school. He's never even been anywhere near one. Jin Si-rom asked who taught him such fighting techniques back then. The guy replied that no one taught him. He was self-taught. This greatly surprised the girl. She began to scream, not believing it, saying that it was complete nonsense. He had such movements, such a sense of timing. She couldn't believe that he wasn't joking. And then some kind of badge flies into her face. She threw it aside, got angry and asked what it was. Then she took out a map from there. There was a photo of Cha Ryung and information that he was a first-year student at Donggang High School. There was nothing left to think about. This was an ordinary school with a liberal arts focus. This simply couldn't be happening. The girl still didn't believe it. Her hands were shaking. The guy said that the girl also had to show her student ID or other document. He held her card in his hands and read the name. It turned out that she was also a first-year student, but already in the hero's high school. They were the same age. After that, he took both student cards into his pocket. The girl did not understand why he needed them. The guy didn't see anything strange in this. After all, she herself wanted to give him a job. And since she had already seen his face, he decided to take everything he could so that she would not change her mind. Besides, nothing is over yet. He called the girl to him, took her by the shoulders, and she blushed, not understanding what he was doing. Instead of a contract and proof of cooperation, she realized that if anything happened, she could be accused as an accomplice. After all, accomplices of smugglers receive the same punishment. And at that moment, Se-ram realized one thing. The guy wanted to take a selfie. He ordered her to smile. And it became entirely possible that she had gotten involved with a man far more dangerous than she thought. They stood together in front of the dead Titan. The guy took a photo. And then she realized that it was too late to retreat. Cha Ryung decided to estimate how much he should be paid, and asked first what exactly he should do. The girl replied that she needed to collect coins. In 6 hours, you need to find coins hidden in different corners of the examination field, and also find a box with an image of a coin, with which she must confirm her identity. She has already found one coin, and if she finds one more, she will pass the exam. Moreover, the coin is located nearby, in the area where the Eugene Mall used to be. This news greatly surprised the guy. He understood how it all happened. The girl had not stumbled upon the monster by accident. He was looking for something, and this something was inside the shopping center. When the girl heard about the heavenly wasp, she was shocked and screamed, not believing it. Cha Ryung, trying to smooth things over, calmly explained that he was not looking for the wasp itself, but something like its honey. It has a very strong smell that attracts monsters. Most likely, this monster also followed the smell. He didn't care, but the girl said that she had to go there personally. Then he clarified whether the coins were really only there. Jinsi Ram replied that there were no coins left in other places. The rest were collected by other teams. Then he understood why she was alone. However, for him it is even better. He offered to get the coin for her and leave safely because it was his job. The girl replied that she would pay him 950 million for it. This is all she has available at the moment. If that wasn't enough, she asked for a little time, but the guy stopped her. He said that if there were any additional expenses or reasons for additional work, then she would pay extra. Then he asked if she had any strength left. They ran together through the forest, and the girl was surprised at how quickly her companion moved. Cha Ryung was thinking at this moment that he was shocked for a second by the amount that was announced, but perhaps he should have asked for more. The girl running behind asked if she could ask him a question. Having received consent, I asked if it was true that he had never studied anywhere. He replied that he couldn't say that no one at all, and began to talk about his childhood. But suddenly they noticed two monsters in the distance. He warned the girl to get ready. These were cluster raptors that lived in the area of Old Barama. Cha Ryung had never been trained in hunting techniques anywhere. All his skill came through personal experience. He fought with his bare hands, risking his life. But there was one exception. As a child, he watched his father's technique, thanks to which he learned 3 simple techniques. And now he is already rushing towards the monster to kill it. The first thing he learned was the needle technique. It mobilizes everything: speed, strength, and body weight. When striking, the technique is directed at the enemy's weak point. It may seem easy, but in reality it is different. Such feelings and abilities are the result of experience. Even among high-ranking hunters, few can say that they have mastered such a technique on their own. And Cha Ryung mastered it to perfection. Together they defeated 2 monsters. The boy killed one with his pole, and the girl with a bow and arrow. She found this strange, since usually such monsters gather in groups of at least 5 individuals. This meant that she wasn't the only one who suffered because of the royal jelly. They were almost there, and more monsters could gather there soon. The guy suggested taking a little rest and then moving on straight away. Jinsei Ram said she wanted to ask him if he had received any private lessons as a child. Cha Ryung replied that there were no lessons. He just peeked in on the training a few times. I watched and learned a couple of techniques, and that's all. Then he turned to the girl and asked why she was looking at him like that. She replied that he irritated her. After that, she threw something in his direction, and the guy caught it with his hand. It turned out to be an ampule of endurance. He asked why she gave it to him. The girl said that he was probably not in the best condition either and offered him a drink. The guy joked that if she gave him the ampule because of irritation, then she should continue to speak badly about him. He put the ampule in his pocket. The girl asked in surprise why he wasn't going to drink it. Charyong replied that he could sell it later. The girl did not believe him. After all, it was just an ampule. But the guy explained that he knew its price very well. On the black market, you could get about $1 million for it. Jinsei Ram was shocked. She realized that this guy was very strange. He had already started to leave and said that if she had been drinking, then she shouldn't stay long. They needed to go. Charyong thought to himself that all these rich kids were very strange. The guy clarified, their goal is not hunting. They must get what everyone needs safely and leave. No matter what kind of monster is inside, the girl must control herself and follow its instructions. She had studied a lot, but survival was his strong point, and she should trust him. The girl couldn't understand why she had such a strange feeling now. She spent 6 months at the school for heroes, but was never able to gain recognition or fit in. And now, for the first time, she was going to go into the danger zone not alone, but with someone. Now they came to the entrance of the building. They stood at the entrance examining the situation inside. Suddenly they noticed something that left them in complete shock. The girl got scared and asked what it was. Charyong replied that he didn't know. It was the first time he'd seen something like this too. In front of them on the floor lay dozens of monsters, brutally killed, all covered in blood. Man is a much braver creature than he thinks of himself. With just a little preparation, he can face any situation head-on. Problems can arise when things happen outside of what was expected. All these monsters that lived in this zone were of a dangerous level, even for professional hunters. The girl did not see what was in the depths of the room. She was curious about what was hidden inside. Charyong warned her not to relax because there was something dangerous inside. Jinsei Ram was surprised. This place turned out to be much worse than she expected, but it didn't change anything. Suddenly, she noticed a shadow in the depths of the building begin to move. The guy immediately took out his pole and aimed in that direction. A monster with one arm and no head came out of the darkness. With one huge mouth located on the chest and stomach, it was a creature nicknamed the Rib Lover, a monster with a very high danger level. He stuck his long, slippery tongue out of his belly and darted it towards the guy. Charyong parried the attack with his pole, but his tongue wrapped around the weapon. The monster pulled the pole towards itself along with Charyun, who did not let go of it. The guy lifted himself off the floor and flew towards the monster. But before he could get into its mouth, he let go of the pole. The monster pressed the weapon to itself, preparing to swallow it. But at that moment, Charyun jumped back and, having secured himself to the ceiling, hung upside down, watching what was happening. He then jumped down and kicked straight into the monster's eye, which was on top instead of its head. After that, he approached the girl. She admitted that she was very scared. She was sure that the creature was dead, but it turned out to be alive. Charyong explained that parts of his body were intentionally left alive so that the monster would serve as a warning to anyone who entered the area. When threatened, it emits a piercing scream that alerts other monsters. The girl was very surprised to hear about this method of protection and could not understand who could have arranged it. Suddenly, a guy appeared on the balcony and announced that it was him. He couldn't stay awake and wait for Charyong any longer. There were more monsters than he expected, and once he had dealt with them, he felt very tired. Jinsei Ram didn't understand what he was talking about. Was this stranger really acquainted with her partner? The man yawned tiredly and said that everything that was happening seemed very strange to him. In his opinion, these uninvited guests are too young to be smugglers. He then jumped off the balcony at incredible speed, landed in front of them and asked the girl if she was a student at the hero school. The man said he didn't know what kind of alliance they had, but he was sorry. They will have to die here and now. Charyong asked the girl why she was even talking to this man. He explained that this man was not an ordinary hunter, as she thought. It was a villain who wanted to kill Charyong and get the royal jelly. Apparently, he had no connection with his customer. He was just curious about how Charyong was going to deal with the consequences if he stole someone else's. The man replied that the only thing to worry about was if he was exposed. However, he considered himself lucky. He accidentally overheard his colleague preparing to get his hands on the precious item. Initially, he wanted to attack him on the way, but not everything happens as a person plans. He failed to complete his plan. He saw the monster run away in that direction, but he was never able to find it. In his opinion, there must have been some kind of shelter in this place, in which the treasure was hidden. At that moment, Charyong realized that the connection with the person in charge was not interrupted because of the poison of the heavenly wasp. It was all the work of a stranger. He didn't have to engage in direct combat to understand something. A real hunter stood before him. The stranger said that Charyung's death was predetermined, but he can make it as useless as possible. This hunter was very different from the one the boy had encountered before. Charyung told his companion that he would distract the stranger, and she should find the coin as quickly as possible and get out of here. The building had already been cleared of danger thanks to the stranger's actions, and nothing would change if the girl stayed. However, at that moment the stranger himself appeared before him and said that he had heard everything. He took out his katana and struck. Charyung was barely able to parry the attack and shouted at the girl to run. He will only be able to get his money if she stays alive. The stranger saw that the girl had indeed left, but in his opinion, it was not the smartest choice. The chances of survival would be higher if they stuck together. Charyung didn't understand what kind of nonsense he was talking about. He activated his blue magic, and he struck back with force energy. The stranger was shocked that the boy had calculated the trajectory of his sword. The next second, Charyung's foot flew towards him and hit him in the face. The man flew to the end of the room. While Charyung was trying to catch his breath, after a few seconds the stranger stood up and said that he was a little surprised. He didn't expect to have to use his equipment, since he didn't take the guy seriously because of his age. However, he admitted that he was even above the professional level. And now he will have to sweat to eliminate that girl from the School of Heroes. He added that Charyung shouldn't worry. It wouldn't take him long. The stranger turned out to be Yang Do-gyun, a gold-ranked hunter. At this time, in another building, there was a kettle on a portable stove. Im Jae-hwan made some noodles, saying that it was not a bad thing and could be eaten. Then he asked the customer if he wanted a glass too, and he added that the man had better sit down because his friend would not wake up anytime soon. The customer said that his security guard spent so much time pumping up his muscles in vain. He paid him so much, but it was of no use. He himself claimed that he was a hunter and boasted of his strength. Im Jae replied that there was no point in wasting oneself. The man lost not because he was stupid, but because he deserved to lose. He was wrong about one thing. Hunters should not fight with people. This also applies to his guard. He was trained for reconnaissance, not for fighting other hunters. He might have been able to deal with the monster, but it is not surprising that the smuggler defeated him. The man started shouting that he heard the hunters fighting among themselves. Im Jae agreed. Of course this happens. The higher the hunter's level, the more serious the conflicts become. Even comrades and colleagues who rely on each other can stab each other in the back out of greed. The customer was shocked and asked if they were really killing each other. Im Jae explained that no one can forbid this. Anything can happen in the dungeons. For example, you can claim that your comrade was killed by a monster, and no evidence will be required. The higher the level of the hunter, the more they train in anticipation of fighting each other. But the customer's security guard was not a high-ranking hunter. He just beat up a colleague in the past. In Im Jae's opinion, it even sounds cute in its own way. If he was caught doing this, then the incident took place outside the dungeon. It was probably a trivial skirmish over equipment. The customer was surprised, not understanding what equipment had to do with it. Im Jae explained that hunters take armor and weapons with them when they go hunting. There is quite a bit of sense in this assumption. If the guard had at least some equipment, he could have fought. For a hunter, equipment is half the fighting power. At the same time, Charyung thought that he definitely didn't miss with the attack. The blow was delivered properly. Yang Do-gyun was already rushing towards him with a sword, saying that there was no need to fill his head with all sorts of nonsense. He tried to strike again, but Charyung blocked the attack with his staff. The man said it was impolite, both to him and to his own life. He then kicked her in the stomach. The guy flew to the side, but kept his balance and did not fall. The hunter appeared next to his face again. Another skirmish ensued. Sparks from the clash of weapons, light from metal cutting metal. The weapon moved so fast that Charyung didn't notice how he was hit. Yang Do-kyun laughed and told him to show what else he could do. The man used equipment called a shadow jacket. Due to the user's blood, it provided support for physical strength, and also formed a protective cover from blows. It was on these foundations that the berserk style used by Yang Do-kyun was built. He couldn't help but have weak points. But Charyung couldn't just respond to every attack. Otherwise, the likelihood of dying increased significantly. The man swung his sword again at the stomach area. After the blow, he happily wiped the blade, confident that his opponent was caught. Charyung was kneeling in front of him, holding his stomach. The man, assessing the fight, admitted that the guy held out for quite a long time. However, Charyung, breathing heavily, said that it must be a special day since he had to take off his favorite jacket. He added that there is nothing special about Yang Do-kyun. At first, he was actually scared by the enemy's aura. But if we consider that he himself is an ordinary schoolboy who came without equipment, then all that his opponent relies on is equipment. If he had the same armor, he would have put on quite a show. These words made Yando very angry, and he roared in rage. Charyung understood that his opponent was in a hurry. He not only needed to defeat him, but also catch up with Se-ram to eliminate her as well. So Charyung was just stalling for time. While Yang-do became more and more impatient. During the fight, their magic converged. One had dark magic, the other had light magic. The second technique, which Charyung had mastered as a child while spying on his father, was much stronger than the first. It was impossible to accomplish it with only one's own strength. He took the enemy's strength and turned it against him, delivering a blow that he himself would not have been capable of. The technique he had not yet fully mastered was called swell. Filling his staff with enormous power, Charyun struck out and caused a powerful explosion of blue magic. He himself was all wounded and spat out blood. He never thought that he would ever use this technique against a person. And even more so, he didn't expect to meet a professional hunter who would attack so recklessly. He suggested that Yando surrender, confident that he would no longer be able to win. But the hunter, insulting Charyung, took out a knife, and, not wanting to admit defeat, he plunged it into his chest. This action greatly surprised Charyung. The man, gasping for breath, said that no matter how it all ended, he would still destroy him. At this time, Se-ram was running on the 5th floor of the shopping mall. And here she stands in front of what she had been looking for so long. A magic box. She placed her palm on it. The box identified her by number and logged in. The girl was glad that she had found this cube, and now she had to go back. But suddenly the room began to shake, and the girl became scared. She remembered leaving her companion to fight, but she knew that nothing would change even if she returned there. Holding the coin, she tried to think that her comrade would certainly not fight for no reason, and he definitely has an escape plan in his head. In the past, Yang Do-kyun pressed himself against the wall while his classmates said he was wrong. He held him by the collar, all beaten and bloody, and assured him that he would not behave like that in front of him anymore. The guy smiled. He was a genius. Since childhood, everything came easy to him, and he knew it. He was very capable. Even his overall grades for written independent work were high. His abilities were recognized by adults, and his peers admired him. But there was one thing that was bothering him. He couldn't pass the entrance test. He received a message that based on the results of the first exam, he did not pass into the Hero High School. They said that you can only get there through connections because they pay more attention to money than to abilities. Jan thought it might be true. If everything depended on skills and abilities, everything would be different, and he certainly wouldn't have lost. Here he stands at the top and hears that those who have passed the exam to overcome difficulties number 7 have been determined. Yang Do-kyun broke all records by taking first place. Unlike ordinary students, he was better. He was a chosen genius. After some time, everyone looked at the exam results and was shocked by the difference in scores. Jan was in first place again. Everyone was talking about how this was a different level and that someone like him would definitely become a ranker. Soon all the students came out onto the platform, and it was announced that this was the end of the graduation ceremony for this year, and that everyone was a great guy. It was graduation. A man approached Jan, congratulating him on his brilliant graduation. He believed that Jan would definitely become a first-class hunter. They shook hands, and the man added that he wished him not to get cocky and to always move forward. Jan considered the man a failure who had been dismissed and assigned to look after children at school. He thought to himself that he would still see his strength. He would look down on him, from a height that ordinary people could not reach. And now, sometime later, while hunting, Jan is sitting on the ground, covered in blood and shaking. In front of him stood a disgruntled man, a titan, who said that he had received a message about an emergency and had run as fast as he could. But there was nothing important here. Yang Do-kyun was shocked. He couldn't understand what had just happened. This man had single-handedly destroyed the monster that had killed his entire team. The stranger turned around and started walking towards Jan. He was familiar with that look. Those he had looked at before had the same look. It was then that he realized something for the first time. The words the man said to him at school were not advice. He said that the boy would certainly become a first-class hunter, but this was only consolation. In fact, he was not the chosen one. He's just one of the ordinary people, perhaps a little better. Now he tells his opponent that the jacket he is wearing is made from a living blood-sucking monster. He allowed the monster to absorb the blood that flowed from his heart. This is the price for this monster to kill Charyong now. The guy didn't ask if he was sure, because it all sounded pretty dangerous. The monster was already flying towards him, stretching out its huge hand with long claws. A bright beam passed across the ground. Dust rose. The monster attacked. Charyong managed to dodge and noticed that the monster's speed was not that high, in his opinion. But the monster again extended his hand towards him. The space around me was blurring. My consciousness was clouded, my head was spinning. Thick scarlet blood began to drip onto the floor. Charyong, covered in blood, was shaking, holding his weapon and barely breathing. The monster noted that he managed to block the blow. The guy had an unusual reaction speed and excellent abilities. He then asked why such a capable man was involved in smuggling. At this time, Charyong opened the ampule of nutrients to replenish his strength and asked why the monster was suddenly praising him. His story and what he does shouldn't concern anyone. But the monster replied that, be that as it may, he was grateful to him. After all, now he has the opportunity to trample someone like him. The monster attacked again. There was a small explosion, and a cloud of dust rose. Charyong emerged from this cloud, having already regained his strength a little. He was fine. He was not physically hurt. The monster was delighted, praised the guy, and asked him to show even more enthusiasm. At this time, Charyong was thinking about the course of the battle and understood that the monster would not be able to strike endlessly. If he feeds on blood, he will eventually reach his limit. You need to make him spend blood and then use the needle technique. At that very second, the monster appeared right in front of him, and the guy realized that it was too late to act. A picture flashed before his eyes, the monster raising its huge hand to strike, but suddenly a fiery attack flew towards him. He saw Jin Si-ram holding a bow. She was the one attacking the monster. Charyong realized that she was indeed very naughty. Yang Do-gyun's monster-like shell began to spread across his face, burning it. Charyong wasted no time and immediately attacked the enemy. A powerful magical wave passed through the room. Yando was lying unconscious with his teeth knocked out, and the girl asked if he was dead. Charyong replied that people like him usually live long, so there was no need to worry. Now this man will no longer interfere with them, otherwise he will have to say goodbye to his career and reputation. The guy said that it could be considered that Se-ram had repaid him her debt, but she didn't understand what he was talking about. The young man reminded her that he had already saved her life once, or to be precise, twice. Once with the Titan, and then when she ran after him. But he decides to forgive her both times. The girl didn't like it very much. Couldn't he just say thank you? Together they went into another room, where everything was also smashed and broken. Inside were mangled cars. There was a huge hole in the floor from which a warm yellow light was coming. They came closer and noticed a staircase leading down. Without saying a word, they began to descend together. The girl caught some sweet smell. The deeper they went, the thicker the yellow fog became. They noticed bloody footprints leading to the wall. There sat a man, covered in blood, holding a suitcase. Charyong walked up to him and sat down opposite him. He turned to the girl and reminded her that he had warned her that there was nothing good inside. Together they decided to check the contents of the suitcase. First they heard the click of the lock, then they opened the lid and smelled a pungent smell. Inside there was a lantern, from which came a sweetish aroma that made you forget about everything. Charyong couldn't understand how anyone could resist that smell. He wondered if there was royal jelly inside. He said it was better to get out of here as quickly as possible. There was no telling who else might show up. Soon they were already on the first floor of the shopping center. There was no one at the place where Yang Do lay. He had disappeared. Suddenly a scream came from the side. Someone was loudly calling them names. The man was shouting that he remembered their faces. Yando ran away, declaring that he would kill them at any cost. He promised that they would both regret what they did to him. With a smile on his face, even though he was completely beaten, he ran away. Suddenly a huge shadow covered him, and the man raised his head in surprise. Towering above him was the same Titan that Charyong had defeated earlier, but now he looked much more powerful and energetic. The man didn't have time to react. The Titan immediately swallowed him, biting off only his hand, which flew to the side. Charyong and Se-ram watched everything that was happening. The guy suggested going out through the emergency exit. Evening came. The sun was setting and the sky turned orange. Charyong stood on the cliff, thinking that this was a safe zone. He asked the girl how things were with the exam time, and she replied that there was still enough time. The guy extended his hand, saying it was nice to meet him. A lot happened today, but in any case, they managed to successfully complete their business. The girl shook his hand. As he was leaving, the guy reminded her about confidentiality and the bank transfer. She shouldn't forget about it if she didn't want to meet him again. The girl asked in response how about meeting again after some time. At the same time, MJ was sitting and reading some magazine when suddenly he was distracted by an extraneous sound. He saw that his worker had returned and it looked like he had been working hard. When a suitcase was placed in front of him, he decided to check it. Opening it, MJ's face was illuminated with a yellow light. The man took out a lamp. They said that if they could sell it, there would be a real fuss. And how many buildings could be afforded for that money? He then praised Charyung and said that he would transfer the payment to him tomorrow. However, noticing that something was wrong with the guy, he asked if everything was okay. He asked if this was related to the hunter who died in battle with him. Charyung replied that the man did not die because of the fight with him, and he did not have to feel guilty. The broker then asked if anything else had happened. The guy replied that nothing happened, put on new clothes and changed the subject. Seeing 2 more bags in the suitcase, he asked if he could take them since they didn't seem to be royal jelly. The broker replied that the smugglers could keep everything that was not related to the order. That was their rule. He wondered which baby would eat this jelly. They said that it could bring even the dying back to life, but it has even stronger properties. It can enhance the abilities of the one who eats it, although few people know about it. It is advisable to take it in childhood. Then the effect is much stronger. Therefore, such a thing will not be fed to someone who has no hope. This must be at least a student of the School of Heroes. Charyong took his briefcase and left. As a parting gesture, the broker asked him to say hello to his father. The guy replied that if he could, he would pass it on, since his condition had recently worsened sharply. He went outside and breathed in the fresh evening air. I was thinking about the Heroes High School. I remembered how I recently met a girl who said that they would see each other again. The guy didn't understand what she meant and said that if she was interested in him, he didn't care. But the girl replied that it was not a joke. In winter, they would hold exams for transfer to their school. Every year they recruit at least 1 or 2 students, and he may well be able to join. She suggested that he enroll in their school for heroes. One hunter cannot defend the dungeon alone. No matter how excellent his qualities are, it is not enough. It is extremely difficult, almost impossible, to deal with endless waves of attacking monsters alone. That's why hunters need a team. Each hunter uses their own skills, and thus the team members compensate for each other's weaknesses, overcoming obstacles. This is called clearing the dungeon. The girl said that gangs are formed every year at the school for heroes. This intrigued Charyung, and he asked if this meant that the students were choosing sides and fighting each other. Se-ram replied that she wouldn't even talk about such childish nonsense. There were 2 groups in her class, led by students in the top 3. The guy asked if it was true that teams were formed only from those who were part of these groups, and that was why she couldn't get into any of them. He also asked if the teachers didn't interfere, and the girl confirmed that this was the case. Finding a team depends solely on the student's abilities. She realized that her companion wanted to say that she lacked abilities. She knew it herself. She couldn't become an excellent student, but not so weak that she can't fit into any team. There were also those who were not members of any group, but created their own team. She already mentioned that there are 2 groups, and the leader of one of them doesn't like her. Although it doesn't show on the outside, intrigues are being woven behind her back to ensure that the girl is not accepted anywhere. Charyung sarcastically suggested that maybe she stole her boyfriend, but the girl categorically denied it. Now she can hold on alone, but in her 2nd and 3rd years this won't be possible anymore. That's why she wants to hire Charyung. With his abilities, even just being there, he can help her survive. Charyung was already at home and unpacking the first aid kit. He bandaged the wounds, covered the scratches with a bandage, and, remembering Se-ram, thought that she was quite funny. At this time, Se-ram walked through the forest and found the right place. Came to the barrier of the Gangnam Dungeon, 12th branch. She remembered how Charyung had left heartlessly, saying that he understood everything and only wished her luck. So she didn't expect him to call her. Someone called out to her, saying that she had arrived on time. In front of her, leaning against a tree, stood teacher Kang Jong-guk, a man with a scar on his eye and a prosthetic arm. He was blind in one eye. He was a class teacher at Hero High School and a close combat instructor. The girl asked what had happened, since the exams were not over yet. The man replied that there was a problem. In some areas, monsters were found that shouldn't be there. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but a signal was received that it was impossible to continue conducting the exam in these areas. The place where the girl found the coin was one of those zones, and he asked her if she had any problems during the exam. The girl replied that no, she didn't see anything unusual. Suddenly, the teacher told her to stand behind him. A giant appeared behind her. She was surprised that there was a monster here, and it looked much stronger than the one before. It was a titan ape, a mature individual with a very high risk level. The teacher was also amazed to see this particular monster. Such monsters do not live in these parts. Was it possible that something had drawn him here? The girl suspected that the monster came to the smell of the thing that was in the suitcase. The man covered her with his body, telling her to stand behind him, and began to warm up the prosthesis. The giant's eyes filled with anger. All of the teachers at the School of Heroes were former hunters, and most of them graduated from the school themselves. Now, being retired due to injuries, they could no longer defend the dungeons. Although this was only an outside opinion, the man activated the firepower, and when Titan extended his hand to strike, he also struck back. A fiery impulse passed through my hand. It was all ablaze. Steam was coming from it. This impulse reached the monster's head, which caught fire. The entire top of the head melted. When the man was not yet 30, he was a ranker and received the nickname Fighter Against Tyranny. The giant fell to the ground with a crash and the earth shook. The teacher's prosthetic arm also melted. He said that in everyday life you have to restrain yourself, and Se-Ram was very lucky because something terrible could have happened. He put his hand on her shoulder, saying he was glad she was alive, and he ordered to go back. The man himself did not pay attention to the opinions of others because he was a hero and taught future heroes. They returned to the Hero High School Basic Skills Training Camp. Someone asked what would happen to those who sent a request for help. The man in armor replied that they would most likely retake the exam. His friend added that they were lucky. In any case, in his opinion, everyone who went that way was weak. At that moment, they noticed the teacher and Se-Ram approaching them. The man told her to go to the buildings and wait. As soon as the others returned, she would have to check that everything was in place and change into her school uniform. The girl put her hand on her chest and breathed a sigh of relief. One of her classmates told everyone that Se-Ram was fine, just like she said. She didn't know about the others, but Se-Ram quickly grasps the situation. It was Anisha. She said with relief that she was very worried about Se-Ram. The girl replied that she didn't expect her to worry about her. Anisha asked with a hypocritical smile why she was saying that, because it was even offensive. And she called Se-Ram sister. 6 years ago, someone tried to teach Se-Ram how to do magic. The man said that this was very weak magic. It needed to be increased in strength. It was her uncle, Zeke. He told the girl to concentrate so as not to respond to anything. She was 11 years old then. Sweat appeared on the girl's face and she was shaking all over. The man interrupted the lesson, said that she had done a great job and that would be it. It was better than last time. Although still a bit weak, all tired, she heard someone's excited cry in the distance. Turning around, Se-Ram saw another girl casting spells with ease. It was Anisha, her cousin. She was also 11 at the time, and magic came very easily to her. She didn't look like a half-elf at all, and it wasn't just her appearance that showed it. Her ability to control magic was higher than most purebloods. Uncle Se-Ram said that her cousin was simply a genius. If she goes the hunter's way, they will be constantly compared. Although it would be good if that were the case. But Se-Ram definitely needs to be careful. If she stumbles, Anisha might crush her. At this time, the girl made a surprised face, saying that she could not understand. Why doesn't anyone want to take Se-Ram into the team? After all, its qualities are quite sufficient. Se-Ram replied that if she was so curious, she could join the same team with her. The girl refused, saying that it was too much. Of course, she would like it, but they are both ranged fighters. If only they were at least on the same level. And why put two of them in the same position at once? It would be better for Se-Ram herself, but it could harm the other team members. The girl said not to worry too much. Perhaps they will allow me to retake the exam. Se-Ram replied that she didn't care whether she would retake the exam or not, since she had already passed it. Anisha praised her, saying that it seemed like she really tried, but she advised not to overdo it. In the end, she will still get her father's company. After that, the blonde left, leaving Se-Ram to silently rage. Anisha whispered that she was fighting with all her might. At this time, Cha Ryong came to the university hospital. He opened the door to the ward. 2 doctors stood near his father's bed and asked the boy if he was a relative of the patient. Cha Ryong asked what happened. Did his father have a sudden attack? The doctors just looked at each other worriedly. They said that this was a very rare case. One could even say the only one in the whole world. Now they were in the head doctor's private office. He explained that no one had ever survived dragon poisoning. Cha Ryong understood that it was impossible to cure his father with modern medical technology. Complete healing is impossible. There is only one way to suppress the disease with painkillers. The doctor confirmed that this is indeed the case, but the problem lies in the composition of these drugs. The milk that is used is highly dangerous and the monsters feed it to their pets. This is the only remedy against the poison today. Cha Ryong knew that it was very rare, if it all came down to money. But the doctor replied that the problem was not only in that. There are rumors among hunters about a new potion. Even a small dose of this remedy is capable of significantly increasing muscle strength and resistance for a long time. One of its ingredients is the milk of the celestial tiger. Previously, it could be obtained for money because it was almost never used anywhere. But now the situation has changed dramatically. Entrepreneurs and hunters are buying it up in large quantities. Cha Ryung couldn't believe it. Was it really impossible to get even a small dose to save just one person? The doctor replied that this was the problem. From one dose needed to treat his father, several dozen injections of the potion could be made. If a large number of people needed such treatment, the state would establish certain rules. But when it comes to one single patient in the entire world, no one who makes a profit will give it up for him. However, doctors will try to do something, but without special connections, the chances are extremely small. Night fell. Cha Ryong left the hospital and, tired, sat down on a bench nearby. He took out his phone and called someone. At this time, Se-ram was training in the gym and was very surprised to receive a call from him. She answered right away. The guy asked if he was calling too late, but she said it was okay. He reminded her of her proposal and said that he might agree. Se-ram asked if he had any conditions. They discussed that they needed to test some things first, but that perhaps everything would work out. The guy asked if she could get some milk, and she confidently replied that yes, their company also produces this potion, and he didn't need that much. The guy put his hand on his head, not believing what he heard. Se-ram asked if that meant he agreed. Cha Ryung answered yes, and asked if there was time on Sunday. The girl explained that it was necessary to start preparing for the exams. Preparation would not hurt. And so Cha Ryong came to the Special Research Institute of the Defense Industry of the Chinsen Group. He looked at the building from the outside and was very surprised. Suddenly, he heard a voice from behind. Someone noticed that he had arrived early. A girl got out of the car and asked if he was feeling okay. Cha Ryung asked what they were going to do here and was told that they were going to measure his abilities. After the merging between the worlds began, people gained powers that went beyond the laws of nature. Before this, ordinary people had D-rank abilities. When the indicators rose one level and reached the highest rank, people were already called geniuses, and the indicators of the highest rank level allowed us to talk about superpowers. In addition to magical power, at least 5 indicators must be level C. Only then can you become a hunter. If at least 3 of them reach level B, the person can apply to the hero school. The boy asked if he would have to undergo some kind of medical checkup. Se-ram explained that it was done in childhood, but in adolescence the measurements become a little more complicated. Cha Ryung didn't understand exactly how much more difficult it was. And now he was standing in the building wearing a protective helmet. Why didn't he guess right away when the girl asked how he was feeling? He was in some kind of suit now. In front of him stood a combat robot, Geocron Pro. And since he's already here, we need to fight properly. In fact, he himself was interested in what his indicators were. The robot's eye flashed and the button on his chest began to glow even brighter. At this time, Se-ram was watching what was happening through the screens from another room. A girl sat at the table with a cup of coffee, noticing that the guy was holding himself confidently. Usually everyone gets scared when they first see golems. It was John Yo-min, a golem summoner and former hunter who now works at a research center. She remembered that the guy didn't want to transfer to the hero school, but it seemed like he had prepared properly. John Yo-min decided it was time to begin and pressed the button. The robot immediately activated and began to attack. Measuring ability scores is usually done at age 6 or 7. For such tests, special devices are worn that stimulate the body and push it to its limits in different areas. The more unique abilities and the more trained a person is, the more difficult it is to carry out measurements. After all, it is difficult to maximize such indicators. Cha Ryung's performance was at a professional level, and it would be difficult to find out his limits. Although due to yesterday's incident, his physical strength is probably at its limit. Yo-min asked the girl if she was the one who said that her friends went to a regular high school and the guy didn't get into a specialized school because he failed the exam. She asked this out of simple curiosity. After all, with such abilities, he could not fail. Even though the challenge was less challenging, it was clear that the guy had undergone professional training. At first, he dodged several times, reading the golem's tactics, and then he waited for the right moment to deliver a precise blow. His reaction and sensitivity rates were amazing. He performed better than any professional. So Ram asked how the measurements were going. Min found it difficult to answer. The guy still hadn't reached his limit. She'll have to up the difficulty level. However, she admitted that there was no particular point to it. Truly accurate results can only be obtained in safe mode. Launching the golem at full power may be effective, but C-ROM needs to understand something. Disabling the protective mode for an ordinary person who is not a professional hunter is illegal. In that case, they didn't know how exactly to test his abilities. Min admitted that this was the first time she had encountered such a case, and there was only one way out. Suddenly, a man appeared from behind her and said that he doubted the girls would pay for the time she spent racking her brains over this. Min stood up in fright and looked to see who had arrived. It was the chief, the director of the Department of Investigators and Development of the Chinsen Group Company. He was clearly unhappy that the lab was being used without permission. Se-Ram immediately recognized him as her uncle. The man warned that he hoped they would realize that they would be punished for their actions. Se-Ram began to defend her assistant, saying that it was she who asked her for help. The man asked if she really thought that such an excuse would help justify the behavior of his subordinate. He reminded her that it was her father's company, not her own, and Se-Ram is not responsible for anything here. The rumors about the boss turned out to be true. Even though he was Se-Ram's uncle, he treated her coldly since childhood. But in fact, the girl did nothing wrong. After all, there's no one here on weekends anyway. And other hunters from the Chinsen group also use this room. The uncle began to scold his niece but was suddenly interrupted by Charyung's voice. The guy asked if there were any problems. The man asked who he was and if he was her classmate. Se-Ram explained that it was just her friend who wanted to become a hunter. But last year he failed his exams and lost his measurement results. It's not cheap, and they just wanted to help someone in need. Zeke noticed that the robot golem was already unconscious, and he said that he would conduct the investigation himself. Min didn't understand what he meant. The man then explained that measurement was impossible while the golem was in safe mode, so he will personally go down and fight Charyung. The guy was still in the training room, not understanding what was happening. Is there a serious problem? This is extremely rare. But when it is impossible to measure the maximum values, competitions may be held between hunters. In such cases, the opponent must have skills that significantly exceed the capabilities of the test subject. Zeke opened the door and entered the hall, saying that it would be unexpected. But this performance could not be missed. He did not have much time. Charyung, looking at him, was surprised to realize that he didn't know who was in front of him. But he immediately sensed danger. The man confirmed that the guy probably already realized who he was dealing with. And the man must do everything possible to replace the golem. Remembering Yang Do-kyun, Charyung realized that this man was much stronger than he had ever met before. No matter how you look at it, Charyung felt that he could defeat him. Zeke calmly told him to attack and not to worry about his safety. A huge magical blue cloud immediately appeared behind Charyung. He jumped up and rushed towards his opponent with a pole in his hands. Zeke is the director of the Research and Development Department of the Chinsen Group and Se-Ram's uncle, and also White Hunter, which ranks 7th in South Korea. Charyung knew, if there was no suitable moment to strike, then you need to create it yourself. His strategy was simple, a powerful blow that could only be dodged. And in the moment of hesitation, when the opponent tried to dodge, Charyung delivered the main blow. Here he attacks with a pole, and Zeke calmly stops him with his hand. Charyung is completely shocked. How could this man so easily repel such a strong attack? The man notes to himself that the enemy turned out to be much less attentive than he expected. He then snatches the pole from his hands and kicks Charyung in the stomach. It flies off to the other end of the room, raising clouds of dust. Zeke ponders that maybe Charyung just thinks that this isn't a real fight and that he can take as many hits as he wants. Or maybe he seriously believed that his technique would work. Regardless, Zeke thought the guy looked pathetic. He lifts the pole with his foot and notes. Charyung didn't even lose consciousness, but he still dropped the weapon. He then throws the pole back to its owner, adding that one repetition of such stupidity will be enough. If he makes the same mistake again, Zeke will send him home. It would be better for him to forget about his dream of becoming a hunter. Charyung didn't understand why this man seemed to have a personal grudge against him. He gathers magical energy around himself again and attacks. Zeke notices. The same technique again, the same speed of approach. But suddenly an attack from a distance flies towards him. The man understands. This is a standard technique. At such a distance, the attack is insufficient. Charyung says it's just a warm-up. He concentrates all his power into the pole. Zeke watches, not understanding what he is doing. Charyung points the back of the pole towards the man, where magic begins to emanate. The man admits that his strength is not bad. He swings his fists, very quickly repelling all attacks. Se-ram and Yeo-min are watching this. The girl says that this is a fight between two professionals and is even surprised that Cha-ryung did not enter any academy with such abilities. However, as she notes, it has one serious drawback, and it is truly devastating. Se-ram was noticeably superior to Cha-ryung in a certain aspect, and she was even surprised. Is he really weaker than her? The very man who fights on equal terms with her uncle. She became interested. What is his weakness? The man continued to fight, using his strength to the fullest. Cha-ryung was surprised when he almost got hit in the face, only a few centimeters away from touching. Yeo-min, who was watching the battle with excitement, noticed that the leading role had now passed to Zeke. Cha-ryung coughed in pain after being hit in the chest, but without wasting any time, he tried to land a strong blow to his opponent's face. To no avail. Zeke noted that this time, Cha-ryung did not let go of the pole, as he should have. He continued the attack, striking him in the chest. From him, Cha-ryung flew back to the other end of the room. Yeo-min noted that the boss was not joking, even though he controlled his strength. Zeke, standing victorious, said that he was not going to comment on Cha-ryung's defeat. It was predetermined. However, the process leading to this defeat looked pathetic. Cha-ryung didn't even have basic knowledge, which was surprising. Yeo-min explained. His fighting sense and skills are truly excellent, but the basic elements, steps, attacks, defense, clearly indicated a lack of initial training. She admitted that she was disappointed. With such abilities, he could have been much stronger if he had undergone at least basic training. Se-ram remembered how Cha-ryung himself said that no one taught him. Leaving the battlefield, Zeke said that he had seen quite a few guys like that, with rare abilities but without the slightest desire to develop them. Now Cha-ryung will have to pay for his measurements. Although it would be better if he admitted his own hopelessness, relying solely on innate talent without effort will not lead to success. Cha-ryung took off his helmet and stood up from the floor. He didn't understand why this man allowed himself to be so sarcastic, calling him lazy. Does Zeke really not tolerate people like him? The man turned around, surprised. After all, the last blow was supposed to end the fight. However, Cha-ryung said that he didn't care about the measurement fee. He offered to fight again and promised to show the result of his efforts. The girl watching what was happening did not understand what was happening. She noted that the desire to go to the end is good, but all the necessary data has already been obtained, and there is no longer any need for a battle. Se-ram also reminded that the measurement was completed, praised Cha-ryung, and said that he could now go back and wait for the results. Zeke added that he didn't understand what he was trying to achieve. It's all useless. The result won't change no matter how much they fight. Or does he just want to hear recognition? Want Zeke to say, "That's enough?" and acknowledge his willpower? Cha-ryung explained that he was just really angry. Everything was ending, and he still couldn't land a single punch properly. He had his own reason. No one trained him. He started from scratch. However, thanks to his outstanding abilities, he was able to fill in the gaps in his knowledge on his own. And if you add to this his vast life experience, when he risked himself again and again, it is not surprising that his skill developed to a level bordering on the miraculous. But Cha-ryung didn't think of himself as special. He looked with regret at those who were called hunters, because in reality they weren't. Zeke was different. He began to wonder if he himself was to blame for what was happening. But anyway, if necessary, he would crush Cha-ryung without even giving him time to get angry. He was a monster capable of surpassing Cha-ryung. He just smiled mischievously. It didn't matter to him. For the first time he met a real hunter, and he himself didn't notice how youthful blood began to play in him. Yeo-min was going crazy, not understanding why even her boss was acting this way. At this time, Se-ram noticed that the guy had taken an unusual stance, not at all the one he had used before. The way he held the pole, the center of gravity, everything indicated that this position was not intended for ordinary pole swinging. It seemed like he had become a completely different person. Cha-ryung rushed forward with his weapon, delivering powerful blows in a wave. One of them just barely grazed Zeke's face. Yeo-min watched everything that was happening with surprise. The guy wasn't spinning in the air. He was levitating, sliding through the air as if riding a wave of his own momentum. He was throwing punches as if he were dancing in battle. Zeke, however, calmly dodged the attacks without making any special effort. Se-ram compared Cha-ryung's current actions with his previous ones and realized how rude and clumsy he had been before. Another girl noticed that there was not the slightest hesitation in his continuous movements. It is not known from whom he was trained, but he was certainly trained properly. Despite his shifty eye, Charyong used all his strength. The muscles in his body tensed. Each attack was measured and full of determination. Charyong recalled watching his father practice in the yard as a child and imitating his father's movements, using a broom as a weapon. Now he missed again, but this time against a real strong opponent. Zeke activated his power, his hand glowing, and he easily flew into the air to strike. In the boy's memories when he was training, his father noticed his efforts. Charyun remembered all this now, continuing the fight with complete determination on his face. The guy confidently dodged the blows. He remembered how his father's strong hand had guided him, how he then, being just a child, could barely stand on his feet from fatigue after a light warm-up. And now, beaten, but full of determination and strength, he fought until exhaustion. That day, his father stroked his head and praised him. Zeke turned and flew into the sky. He knew that when Charyong landed, there would be a pause, and that was when he could strike. Although now it was almost impossible to dodge his attacks, the man decided to do exactly as Charyong wanted, hit him in the front. A powerful final blow occurs. Zeke admits that if Charyong had continued like this, if he hadn't reverted to his clumsy pole skills, he might even have won. Charyong lay on the floor, breathing heavily, covered in wounds. The man asked him a question. Was all this really for the sake of raising his self-esteem? The guy said no, he just reached his limit and all the moves he knew ended there. In the end, he got it all. But it wasn't bad. He closed his eyes. Zeke had a bad reputation among the rankers due to his harsh nature. However, no one dared to speak against it. It's all because of his outstanding skills. Magical energy appeared in his hand and he gently placed it on Charyong's head. The wounds on the young man's face disappeared. And he told his niece not to worry. He would be fine. He was healed, and there would be no consequences. As he was leaving, Zeke asked the guy's name. He is the holder of the white rank, one of 10 in the entire country, and also the best healer in Korea. I didn't expect to meet the son of such a noble man here. It was evening. Zeke went outside and someone told him that if he was going to be late again, he could at least send a message. A man named Kan Go-ho sat nearby and pointed out that if Zeke had left the car and gone for a drink, they would have missed the briefing again. He asked if Zeke knew that every time they were late, the others blamed him. Zeke explained that he had some things to do that were taking longer than he expected and threw his jacket towards the man. He caught her and asked if Zeke had been fighting with some kid, although it looked like he wasn't alone. Seeing the scratch on Zeke's face, Kang Go-ho was surprised and asked if it was a wound on his cheek. He tried to understand with amazement how this was even possible. The man thought that the boy was probably only 16 if he was preparing to enroll. But in fact, he was already 17, and this winter he was going to transfer to the School of Heroes. The driver recalled that during the 3 years he himself studied there was not a single student who passed the exam. He assumed that this guy would definitely do it. He doesn't even have a passport yet, but he's already managed to leave a mark on Zeke's face. Kang Go-ho noted that young people have been frightening lately. Zeke said that maybe Charyong's level is not comparable to his. But with Go-ho, it is almost identical. Kang Go-ho, the leader of Korea's first cleanup squad and the 19th ranked person in South Korea. He was amazed and asked what Zeke meant. After all, in his opinion, their level is not even comparable. He graduated from the School of Heroes, he is 21, and in terms of abilities he is clearly ahead. They switched to talking about the car. Zeke noticed the vehicle for the first time, and Kang Go-ho replied that it was the same car he ordered last time. At this time, Charyong was lying on a hospital bed. Suddenly, he woke up and jumped up. After examining his hands, he was surprised to notice that the wounds had completely disappeared and he no longer felt pain. Se-ram entered the room. She brought mugs of drink, and she asked what he was thinking at all. Did he really hope to defeat her boss? Charyong replied that he was simply angry, since he was the one who started bullying him. The girl couldn't believe it. Why would her uncle hurt anyone? The guy was stunned to learn that it was her uncle. She explained that yes, he was her mother's brother. Charyong suggested that perhaps they don't have the warmest relationship. This is judging by how much Zeke values his niece. It looked as if some strange guy was trying to deceive her, and the man's concern was understandable. Se-ram confirmed that her uncle is not like that. He is just very strict. At that moment, Yeomin entered the room. She asked if the victim had woken up and was interested in whether he was in pain. Charyong replied that he was fine. The girl was delighted. Even if it had hurt, everything would have healed by now. After all, her boss is the best healer in Korea. The guy was shocked by how strong Zeke was. despite the fact that this wasn't even his specialty. Yo Min said that everything was fine. Charyung was fine, and his results were very clear. She handed him the tablet, and he and Se-rom looked at it with interest. Muscle strength. B. Health. A. Agility. A. Intelligence. C. Magic power. D. Endurance. B. Se-rom noted that this was an excellent result. However, Charyung was genuinely surprised and asked if this was really considered good. Yo Min doubted whether he was really an applicant. A mandatory requirement to become a hunter is to have rank A or higher. It is also important that there is harmony between the indicators. Even if one of the parameters is high, but does not correspond to the others, it loses its meaning. If you develop only muscles, they will not be able to pull other abilities along with them. Among ordinary people, there are sometimes those whose one parameter reaches rank A, but everything changes when there are 2 or more of these parameters. People with 3 A rank parameters are 1 in 10,000. They are already capable of fighting alone by the standards of ordinary people. And those who have 3 B rank indicators at the same time are 1 in 500,000. These are candidates for top-class hunters. Charyung has B rank muscle strength and A rank health and agility. Even though he lacks balance, this is already an amazing level. Among the first-year students of the cleaning department, he is on the same level as real monsters. What did he expect? Yo-min smiled and offered him something funny to listen to. Their boss, who Charyung fought against, doesn't have a single A-rank stat among the 3. Stats are innate abilities, but they do not reflect the current skill level. If a person has an A but does not develop it, there will be no difference with a D. Also important is the technique a person uses and its suitability, as well as experience. It cannot be measured in numbers. There are many hunters who, through hard work and constant effort, compensate for the gaps in their characteristics. These words were a hint at Se-rom, and she immediately blushed. Charyung put down the tablet and thanked for the kind words. He couldn't say that he was disappointed, because he himself had little understanding of these issues. However, he added that he has one friend, compared to whom he feels that he is lacking a lot. Yo-min noted that such cases were not uncommon. Perhaps this person was quite famous. At this point, Se-rom interrupted the conversation, reminding him that the measurements were completed, the guy did well, and invited him to meet on the weekend. Yo-min was surprised that Se-rom was leaving so quickly and suggested that they stop by the production department since she hadn't been downtown for a long time. Se-rom refused, saying that she didn't have the necessary connections and it was unlikely that she would be allowed to get in. However, Yo-min reminded her that her uncle had already given permission. Se-rom was shocked. It turns out that uncle really did say this before leaving. He asked to take Charyung to the production department when he woke up. And the manager needs to be told that this is Zeke's guest, and he should pick up the weapon, regardless of the cost. Se-rom was in complete shock, and Charyung, standing behind her, didn't understand anything, not knowing what all this could mean. Every hunter dreams of having highly effective weapons and armor. Even if one has outstanding abilities, low-quality weapons will not be able to provide the owner with the necessary support. Therefore, as the hunter's skills increase, the appropriate weapon is needed. To apply these skills in practice, Charyung realized this himself. However, he doubted whether he really needed a weapon since we were talking about a school. He assumed that the school should provide everything necessary. Yo-min and Se-rom were completely confused by his words. Se-rom asked if he really wanted to transfer to Hero School. She added that he would be right if it were an ordinary school for hunters. Each school provides equipment that meets established standards to avoid discrimination between students. Charyung wondered if things were any different at Hero School, especially considering it was the richest school. Yo-min explained that it wasn't about money. Their school as a whole was different from others. There is a significant difference in the skills and abilities of students, and preparing equipment is also a part of these abilities. That's why at the School of Heroes, students make all their weapons and equipment themselves. The boy realized that, despite their skills, those born into a wealthy family are in the most advantageous position. However, if we consider wealth as another ability, he has nothing to object to. Yo-min cleared her throat and noted that this factor should also be taken into account. However, even without money you can get a good weapon. Those who are likely to become the best hunters or rankers enter the School of Heroes. Therefore, there will always be those willing to invest in such talents. If a student manages to get into the school, he begins to receive offers from various companies and wealthy people. After completing their studies, such hunters either pay a portion of their fees or sign a contract and become advertising faces. For example, Yeo Min received a scholarship from the Chinsen group, and after her retirement, she was guaranteed a research position. Overall, joining the School of Heroes provides many benefits and opportunities to evaluate one's own abilities. However, first of all, you need to get in. The difficulty level of the exam when transferring from another school is significantly higher than that of a regular entrance exam. So everyone does their best, including preparing equipment. The boss promised to help Cha Ryong with this and had already agreed on everything. All that was left was to go down to the underground workshop. Before leaving, the girl said that she would root for Cha Ryong, and she hopes for its admission. Together they walked to the elevators, and Cha Ryong admitted that something terrible had almost happened. Se Ram didn't understand what exactly he was talking about, and the guy explained what he meant. The girl didn't know about her uncle's help. He realized that everyone who wanted to transfer to this school would come super prepared. Se Ram admitted that she also wanted to help him and pay for the weapons. Cha Ryong was touched by her words, but the girl did not understand why he reacted that way. No matter how much money he spends, it is very important who he trusts with the production. The production department in Chinsen Group is of high quality and recognized worldwide. They go down in the elevator, and when the right floor is announced, the doors open. The guy notes that for that kind of money you can expect roughly the same result everywhere. At this point, he realizes that they are in the Chinsen Group's research facility, in an underground forge that was called the Boiling Abyss before the Purge. Se Ram watches his reaction with a smile and asks about his impressions. However, money alone is not enough to use this place. Suddenly, a strange sound is heard, and the guy notices that a huge shadow has fallen on him. Turning around, he sees a silhouette with one huge eye. The creature realizes that these are Zeke's people, and is perplexed as to how anyone dared to disturb him on his day off. He is outraged that Zeke himself did not even want to go down. Cha Ryong immediately tenses up when she sees the monster, but the girl stops him, explaining that the person in front of him is the head of the production department. This is Argus Thunderhammer, a titan. He admits that everything said is true. He really is both a boss and a monster at the same time. After closing his cigar, Argus asks who exactly Zeke was talking about, the guy or the niece. So Ram clarifies that the higher-ups were supposed to send a video with the indicators. Argus replies that he knows nothing about human toys, neither about data nor about video. This is what the workers do, but today they don't work. Se Ram gets a little upset, but the monster replies that it doesn't matter. Zeke said to do everything in the best possible way, which means he can check it himself. Seeing Cha Ryong's bag, he asks if it is his weapon. His eye starts to glow and he challenges the guy to try to catch him. Se Ram looks at his friend and then at the monster in confusion, not understanding the meaning of what is happening. Argus explains that his tribe has a custom. For a warrior whom he has not personally tested, he will not work hard and make weapons. He thought that Cha Ryong was a little different from the other boys. He had a look that was familiar with hunting. It felt like he was already trained. So the guy has to show his skills. Cha Ryong's eyes light up. He feels excitement. He puts down his bag and takes out a pole. It's time to show the Titan that he doesn't shy away from such challenges. He activates his power and rushes towards the monster's face, causing surprise. He then strikes Argus in the chin with all his might with the pole. Se Ram watches what is happening in horror, covering her mouth. The cigar falls out of the monster's mouth and he says he can't believe what he saw, and asks where Cha Ryong got this weapon from. Cha Ryong definitely didn't expect this. He struck, clean, precise, using the needle technique. Of course, there were many monsters that he couldn't take down with one blow, but this time he literally felt the wall. He wasn't sure about the creature's endurance, but it felt as if it was not alive at all. He couldn't understand what kind of monster was in front of him. Se Ram thought that he had acted stupidly, since he had actually gotten into a fight, and she was at a loss for another reason. The level of danger of monsters was indicated by stars. If a monster had at least one star, it meant that it was capable of killing a person. An average adult could handle this level with a weapon in hand. 2-star monsters could only be defeated by trained soldiers with firearms. 3-star level monsters required the participation of motorized infantry and the use of armored vehicles, including tanks. When a monster with a 4-star danger level appeared, it was necessary to immediately evacuate civilians, avoiding any direct confrontation. The evacuation was followed by airstrikes or long-range fire. This was the maximum that the military forces were capable of. And at a level of 5 stars and above, modern armies were practically powerless. Even if the battle was won, it required a huge amount of firepower and the destruction was catastrophic. Therefore, there were those who could deal with such monsters with minimal losses. elite squads of hunters. Argus Thunderhammer was from the Elder Titan tribe and had a threat level of 7 stars. He told Chaoryung that he had just asked him a question. He was genuinely curious about where the guy got that weapon from. Chaoryung didn't respond right away. It seemed like the blow was painful, since the creature was so caught on the weapon. But Argus insisted on an answer, reminding that it was he who made this weapon. He got angry and trampled on the cigar. And again, he asked the question, why is his weapon not in the hands of its real owner, but in the hands of Chaoryung? So Ram nervously bit her nails, realizing that if this weapon was really made by Argus himself, then it was at least rank A. All information about such weapons is entered into the association's database, and their owners are monitored very strictly. Such a weapon could not have fallen into the wrong hands honestly. It was probably stolen or taken away. The girl began to suspect that her companion might have acquired the weapon illegally. However, Chaoryung only said that he doesn't want to talk about it. He thinks it's none of his business. Se-Ram panicked and thought that he was being stupid. It would be better for him to explain everything. But Argus stepped back. He said that Chaoryung could do as he pleased and extended his huge hand towards him. At that moment, the thought of death flashed through Chaoryung's mind. It was impossible to dodge, and he began to think about how to take the blow. He could have used the needle technique, but he knew it was pointless. This monster seemed to have no weak points at all. Chaoryung thought, if he used the swell, he wouldn't be able to use force. Once he got hit, he would be finished. And then he found the answer. It was the third option. The last technique he saw and learned from his father. The law of power. Think clearly, and there will be an explosion. In any clash, the one who is bigger and stronger wins. But what if it's not a head-on collision? You just need to calculate the angle and position correctly. Even if he doesn't win, he can at least dodge. And this was Chaoryung's third weapon. He used Stream. So Ram, who was watching this, was shocked. How could he dodge the attack of a level 7 monster? The only weak spot he could hit was the eye. All that was left was to pierce it with the needle technique. At that moment, the monster grabs him with its hand, or rather, with a mechanical prosthesis, and clamps him in its iron claws, bringing him to its face. The guy was trapped, shaking and angry. The girl intervened, saying that she admitted that the guy looked suspicious, which was why Argus was acting like that. But he has no right to attack a person without finding out his circumstances. He knows that those who have received citizenship in a special manner do not have the right to harm people unless their lives are in danger. If he breaks this rule, he will lose all his civil rights and will again find himself in the category of monsters. The monster calmly replied that she shouldn't worry and let the guy go. He understands everything perfectly. The guy was already lying on the floor. Argus still couldn't figure out why this young man had this weapon. Was this really why Zeke had disturbed him on his day off? He then apologized, admitting that Chaoryung did indeed have the right to the weapon. Throwing away the broken cigar, he said that he would give him a good reward. Later, he noticed a wound on his arm and could not remember when it appeared. The last time he was wounded was 30 years ago. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about. What kind of right did he mean? Argus, taking out a new cigar, asked her if she knew why he worked for people. So Ram suggested that a special hunter squad had raided him 30 years ago, but Argus immediately replied that this was incorrect. These are just stories that people tell each other. Their swords never even touched him. Only one person defeated him then. He cut off the monster's hand and could have finished him off, but he didn't. Argus looked at Chaoryung slyly. He remembered how in the past he was kneeling in some hall and magic was hovering around him. Suddenly he stood up, his eyes flashing, and there stood an opponent in front of him. It was Chaoryung's father, still young, full of strength, with an axe in his hands. He was exhausted but ready for battle. The Elder Titan is one of the highest representatives of the entire tribe of giants. He has reached the highest level of development. His life is practically eternal, and the number of such creatures on Earth is extremely small. Less than 10 Elder Titans are known. Even in physical parameters, they possess an unprecedented level of strength. However, their real power lies in their ability to create weapons and equipment. They are born with the unique ability to create artifacts that possess special magical powers. Only Elder Titans and dwarves can boast of such skills. However, unlike the dwarves, who are friendly to humans and cooperate with them, the Elder Titans do not consider humans worthy of communication. 30 years ago, an operation was carried out to capture Argus. However, a colossus stood in the way of the military, an automatic doll of Argus with a danger level of 4 stars. At that time, the 9th Special Forces team was participating in the operation. Among them was a girl named Oh Song-A, a gunner. She asked if they had managed to establish contact with headquarters. An assistant named Kim Yong-mo, who was in charge of buffs, responded that the communication magic wasn't working, as if someone was deliberately creating interference. Captain Park Chung-man ran up to the squad and announced that the monster was approaching. Everyone was ordered to prepare for an attack. The Colossus swung its weapon, aiming at the people. But the captain took out a huge shield, raised it above himself and was able to stop the attack. At that moment, the girl, like lightning, crept behind the monster's back, and using her blue magic, she struck his head with her sword. However, she was surprised. She only managed to slightly scratch the monster's helmet. The Colossus, in a rage, threw the girl to the other end of the hall with the shield on his hand. A sight appeared before Yan Mo that he couldn't believe. His squad was a first-class fighting unit, the pride of the dungeon clearing of the time, and they could not cope with the horror that was happening in the dungeon of Argus. This is already the 7th Colossus that their team has encountered. Yongmo realized that he needed to run as far as possible. Even if they defeat one, another may emerge from the depths. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by the captain, who tells him to leave immediately. He understands that their chances of survival are almost zero, but perhaps at least Yonmo will be saved. At this moment, the monster attacks with its sword again. The captain uses a shield and activates the potential trigger technique. This skill allows the user to use all of their power without leaving any traces, making the effect last longer than usual. However, once the ability wears off, the user loses the ability to even move, let alone use techniques. The captain's shield begins to glow and reflect enemy attacks. Young Mo screams at the captain, realizing that if he uses the potential trigger to the end, things will end very badly. The man said that not everyone would survive, and that he would not be able to defeat the monster on his own. But he can buy a little time for his comrade to escape. Who knows, maybe he will win after all. Suddenly, someone's huge shadow falls on the captain. They both turn around and realize it's Argus. At that moment, they realize that they had no chance of survival. Argus declared that there were still bugs that he had not managed to destroy. The two men were frozen with horror, overcome with fear and trembling. The captain gave the order to his comrade to run, and he himself put out his sword for defense. If he uses all his strength, he can at least buy a little time. But the giant burns the captain and his weapon with one fiery blow of his sword. His defeat was watched in horror by his comrade, paralyzed with fear and unable to move. Argus contemptuously called the captain's equipment trash and added that the man's body could not withstand it, since it was of poor quality. He noted mockingly that such creatures proclaim themselves masters of this world. What a miserable place. Suddenly, he notices that Yan Mo, despite his fear, is standing in front of him, pointing his emerald-tipped spear at the monster. Argus notes that this man at least has loyalty and a sense of duty, and that is impressive. Even if it's just a little bit, he still can't win. He can't win. Even the captain couldn't cope with this monster, and his magic is certainly not enough. Suddenly, a strange man appears. He says that they shouldn't have gone inside without preparation. It's much safer to gather information gradually, pool forces, and only then act. What's the point of them being the first to attack such a monster? Young Mo, in tears, asks him who he is. The man replies that he received a signal for help from their team, and it was sent by the association. He was one of the volunteers. At that time, he was 32 years old. He found himself without armor because he found it uncomfortable to ride in it, and the new ones were heavier than he expected. Yongmu asked him why he came alone. The man replied that no one else could come down here except him. At this moment, the Colossus attempted to attack the man. After a while, Yusong stands there sweating and realizes how strong the monster was. He wonders if there is as much commotion going on up there and how many more monsters might appear. Until this moment, the man was an unknown hunter. Few people had heard of him. If he really was a representative of the first generation of hunters, his name should have been mentioned. But instead of fame and achievements, he preferred to save others, and therefore did not achieve wide fame. However, it was after this incident that everything changed. With the help of magic and an axe, he cut the Colossus in half. After that, the man dealt with the first monster. The second one looked a little more complicated, and that's when the whole world found out who Yusong was. Yan Mo, who was watching all this, couldn't believe his eyes. This monster could only be caught by uniting all the team's forces. And this man killed the monster with one blow. Suddenly, Yusong turned to him and asked if he had any mana left. Yan Mo replied that there was a little, but it was a simple buff that would be enough. The man replied that he didn't need buffs and asked if he could use magic to make objects fly. Then he told him to take his two comrades and leave from there. Although they looked bad, both were still alive. They are interrupted by monsters who are outraged that he is telling the guy to leave, as if they have a choice. Yusong replies that naturally they have a choice, and without his permission, not a single hair on their heads will be touched. This makes Argus very angry. His eyes fill with anger. He conjures fire in his hand and attacks the man. Yusong also activates all his magic. His body tenses up, his veins popping out. He stops the monster's sword with his weapon. At this time, Yeonmo watches the battle, but at the same time takes his comrades. 10 years have passed since the confluence. During this time, hunters have faced one common problem. The released power and increased physical abilities allowed them to approach the level of superhumans, and also to master the technique of making equipment using materials obtained in the dungeons, which helped them to significantly develop their skills. But despite their high level and equipment, they were not very skilled in using weapons. The answer that was able to break through this wall was human technology, a completely new combat system that went beyond the accepted ones. At that time, only a few hunters felt the need to do so, explored the area, and trained. Yusong was one of those hunters, so he skillfully repelled the attacks and attacked the monster. Young Mo was delighted and happy that the man was winning. The monster fell to the floor and said that compared to the others, the man was on a completely different level. He knew how to use his power. If his weapon had been even half as capable as he was, the situation would have ended completely differently. At that time, Yusong was an unknown hunter. He did not have the opportunity to acquire weapons of the highest rank. A joyful Yusong turned around and saw the hunters leaving, but suddenly the monster attacked him again, and the man barely managed to parry the blow. Argus said that technically this man was the most outstanding of all the people he had seen, but his hammer, on the contrary, is the most terrible in quality. His strength has reached its limit. Argus decided that this was the end and raised his fiery sword. But the man still used his weapon and fought back. The monster was surprised that the axe did not split and took the blow. This was a technique that Charyong later spied on. Swell. With its help, the hunter took the blows and used the enemy's strength. Physical strength, experience, perfection of actions. Everything was on a completely different level. The man flew towards the monster. It was either his art or the essence of the hero. Argus asked if this story wasn't something unusual for Sairam and Charyong. The hero finally defeated the monster. At that moment, due to the move that Charyong's father used, the monster that was Argus died. His life no longer belonged to him, but to his father. However, he did not kill him. In the end, the clearing of the dungeon, which the special squad failed, was declared his victory, and many considered it a miracle. After that, something really unexpected happened. The Elder Titan is a member of a race that considers all others to be beneath them. But he voluntarily surrendered to people and asked for asylum. Seiram remembered that she had studied it as a great event that had shaken the entire world. Argus was later granted citizenship. There were no casualties in that raid, although there were many wounded. However, since he was still guilty, he was obliged to work in this place until he had served his sentence. Now it turned out that Argus was defeated by just one person. This was completely different from what they had been taught. Argus reported that the pole in Charyong's hands was made by him personally. Although Charyong's father did not ask for it, he was a warrior worthy of such a weapon. Charyong said that he had never heard of it. As a child, he thought it was just a sturdy pole with no special functions. That's why his father didn't give it to the creditors. The monster confirmed this. The pole is indeed just a very hard stick that is easy to rotate. He then asked how he thought his father used the empty pole. It turned out that the monster planned to give him the finished weapon if he got the material for the blade. But at some point the connection with him was lost, and he was unable to come in person. So he sent what was already ready. He admitted that he did not know all the details, and it was probably impossible to complete this weapon. But it's not that bad. He asked to give the pole to him. He is going to see this through to the end, and now this weapon will no longer be for his father, but for Charyong himself. After that, the two of them entered the elevator and went back up to the main hall. The girl asked Charyong how he was feeling. He replied that it was passable. It seemed that the last grip was not too strong. Argus held the pole in his hand and said that he did not know how long it would take, but he would try to do everything as quickly as possible. And yet there is no need to rush it. A masterpiece must reach perfection on its own. They walked down the street together, discussing when they would meet next and study for the written exam. Suddenly, the girl started talking about Yusong, saying that he seemed to be an outstanding person. She couldn't even imagine that this raid would be carried out thanks to him, and asked if he was really retired now and being treated in a hospital. Charyung didn't want to discuss it, he just left, saying that he could walk because he wanted to walk and think. Se-ram was already sitting in her car and driving home. She read a brief summary of the case of the first raid of the special squad to clear the dungeon. This was exactly what she had studied before. But if Argus told the truth, then it turns out that those 5 legendary hunters and the Spetstriad took credit for another hunter. It's hard to believe, but Argus has no reason to lie. And if we remember the abilities that Charyong demonstrated, it becomes obvious that his father was a unique master. There have been many similar cases in the past, as it was impossible to verify what exactly happened in the dungeon. There was a case involving the so-called cursed dragon slayer, Yusong, South Korea's top hunter with excellent skills. Most of the achievements recorded in history were faked and framed with threats. Surely, after the man got injured, the truth began to emerge. The girl came across an article that said that this man, who had long been called the false dragon slayer, turned out to be the hero who resolved the situation in the dungeon. He defeated the monster single-handedly. Evidence was found, and it was later revealed that there was a bad relationship between Yusong and the special squad. As a result, the true version of events was revised. Suddenly, Se-ram received a letter with the results of the second semester midterm exam. Sometime later, in the High School of Heroes, in the teacher's room of the dungeon clearing department, a woman was sitting. She said that teacher Kang couldn't even take a proper rest on the weekends because of her. Her name was Jo Se-ah. She was the homeroom teacher of the 12th grade and a magic instructor. The man replied that it was okay, since the girl was a class teacher for the first time, and he needed to check the grade sheets of the first-year students. Everything turned out even better than CA expected. She spoke about the work and the level of the students, which cannot be compared to what it was like when she herself was studying. She asked the man if he knew that this particular student would take first place in the practical exam. He replied that such a result was difficult to predict. Currently, there are 3 students in the first year who are called geniuses. Unexpectedly, it turned out that all 3 were of mixed blood. The first one, Choi Diao, has sword skills inherited from his father, a white-ranked hunter, and also with magical powers inherited from her elven mother. The second student, Anisha Esserm, has magical skills that even a pure-blooded elf would envy. In the future, she will certainly achieve great results and reach a high level. The third disciple was born from the union of a human and a dwarf. From the dwarves, he got strength and durability, and from humans, flexibility and agility. He absorbed the strongest aspects of both races. Seok Cheol Gang is a rising star who has the best physical abilities not only in hero school, but in the entire world. He is a student who ranked first in the midterm exams. The teacher explained that it was not that she doubted his skill. He was in no way inferior to the other 2 geniuses. However, it is usually the leaders who take the first places in the exam. Even though the difficulty level was not high, he took first place single-handedly. Khan noted that working alone also has its benefits, and physical strength is far from his only advantage. Sia admitted that she was a little worried. He had all the potential to be a leader, but he wasn't interested in interacting with other students. Not only the guys from one faculty, but also from other ones are afraid of Chalgang. In the future, especially in the second year, it will not be easy to be alone. It would be nice to have at least one friend with whom you can share your thoughts. But he doesn't seem to care. The teacher said that maybe the girl shouldn't worry too much about it. It often happens that people are not what they seem. It is good to care about students, of course, but sometimes it is better to just believe in them. This can help. 3 days later, Wednesday arrived. A bright, sunny day. 2 boys were walking down the street, discussing someone and his words. Suddenly, a tall figure appeared next to one of them. Seok Cheol Gang stood in front of them. He bowed slightly and apologized, saying that he had not noticed them, but was simply walking and thinking about his own things. The guy started shaking his head in response, saying that it was his fault. After that, he and his friend ran away while Chul Gang looked at the stain on his shirt. He couldn't understand why he was so unlucky. This boy missed his mother very much. In the past, he sat at the table and realized that tteokbokki was a very tasty dish. His mother said that it was indeed so, but she did not know how to cook it because she was not good at it. Seok Yu-bin is a Korean huntress who works mainly in Europe and has an excellent reputation. She often told her son about her homeland, which she missed. Because of this, the boy felt a special sympathy for her from an early age. The atmosphere in which he grew up, plus his personal outstanding qualities, allowed him to enter the hero school on special grounds. If we talk about difficulties, he was very uncommunicative. He would be happy to speak, but he is not very fluent in Korean. He was afraid that others would think he had bad pronunciation. This is a characteristic of introverts. Even if they know the language, it is still difficult to start a conversation. He thought about how he didn't like his character and sighed wearily. Classmates who were nearby apologized for the noise. One of them told the other that he was an idiot and why he was talking so loudly. And so the first semester passed. Chalgang, without wanting to, acquired the image of a majestic lone wolf. His hobby is walking the streets on weekends. He heard someone discussing whether there would be space at the event, since it was usually already full in the morning. He saw two guys entering the gaming center. I remembered how my mother told me that sometimes she went with her friends to karaoke or a computer club, and when you play games, it's really tasty to order something and eat. The guy stood at the screen and was worried, didn't understand how to charge. Someone was on the phone discussing when his girlfriend would arrive because they had agreed on the morning. How could they be late? Chalgang was very nervous and couldn't figure out how to register. He noticed a disgruntled line behind him and a man who continued to chat on the phone. The guy decided that he was only bothering everyone and was going to go home, especially since he was alone anyway. Suddenly, someone came up to him and said that registration was not done here. There is only charging here, but you need to register elsewhere. It was Cha Ryong. He called the boy to follow him and promised to show him how to register correctly. And so they sat in front of the computer. Cha Ryong said that you don't need to fill in all the fields on the form, just the ones marked with an asterisk, and then click Done. If you're done with registration, then you can go back to that device, charge it, choose a seat, sign in, and you're done. Cha Ryong sat down next to the guy, who thanked him. He realized that the guy next to him was a foreigner, but he spoke Korean quite well. It seemed like this was his first time in a computer club. After that, Cha Ryong took out his phone and opened a chat with Se-ram. He wrote that he would definitely come at 2:30 and apologized for being late. Cha Ryong thought that if he had known how everything would turn out, he would not have gotten up at 9 in the morning. It would have been better to go to the black market first. Earlier, he took out some kind of hexagonal black object. He didn't know what it was. He found it in a box of royal jelly. He wondered what it could be, but realized that it was not edible. He'll check when he has time, but now selling items related to heavenly bees is tantamount to suicide. Only the amulet, Blood of Enkel, can be exchanged for cash. He comes from the 3 plagues of the Agara jungle, where the reptile tyrant Enkil lived. Over the past decades, countless special forces have been assembled to destroy it. But not a single raid was successful. All that was recovered were a few broken scales and a little bit of blood. Today, hunting Enkila is prohibited, and the price for such items is literally sky-high. The guy had planned to meet Se-ram at lunch and go to the black market in the evening, but now everything had shifted. A characteristic feature of introverts is to look around and be cautious even when it is not necessary. Chalgang wanted to sit next to him, apologized, saying that there were no other free seats. Cha Ryong replied that everything was fine. It was lunchtime and a day off. He could sit here. Besides, no one else would be coming. There aren't many games that can only be played here. To be honest, the guy prefers playing at home. Cha Ryong looked at his new friend's screen and saw that he was playing a game he was familiar with and had almost the same level. He apologized for asking this at the first meeting. He just doesn't have any friends who also play this game. He asked if he was playing alone and if he wanted to try playing together. In the center of Seoul, there are ruins left here and there which are called scars. During the merger, a huge part of the city, almost all of Seoul, was destroyed. Most of the areas were eventually restored, except for those closest to the dungeons. The space between the guard wall and the city served as a kind of buffer zone. At the same time, a man was sitting behind the screen and talking to someone on the microphone. They were discussing the opening of the gate. The man confirmed and checked everything. In the last 20 years, there has not been a single case where monsters themselves have gone beyond the wall. A truck drove through the gates, a special vehicle for transporting small and medium-sized monsters. The other guards let it through. There was a man behind the wheel who said that every time in such moments he feels how real this life is. His so-called colleagues hunt monsters and make money while he gets pennies for driving. The girl sitting next to him said that if he was not satisfied with something, he could quit and go back to serving. Her name was So Yeon, a former gold-ranked hunter. She asked her comrade why he had come here in the first place. His name was Song Chang-woo, a former bronze-ranked hunter. His arms and legs were intact. The girl said that he only had a license but no ability to find a decent team. He himself didn't know that he wouldn't get more anywhere than as an employee of the association. Chang Wu replied that he didn't have to say it that directly. He just grumbled a little. Suddenly, there was a loud noise in the car. When they stopped the car, they didn't understand what had just happened. Had a monster crawled out of the back? The girl got out of the car and told him to call the center and let them know that they had stopped briefly for an inspection. Chang Wu called and said that the boss ordered him to stop and check everything. He was sure that no matter what happened, the boss was there, so everything would be fine. If it weren't for her injury, she would have reached the ranker. When he heard someone get into the car, he turned around and said that the woman was a good girl. But instead of her, there was another woman sitting there, covered in blood, wearing a red coat and with piercings. She said it was all nonsense and held a tablet in her hands. She noted that for a civil servant, Yen had a fairly quick reaction, but to evade was a completely different matter. The woman began to scroll through the list of those currently in the trunk. She then asked the driver why he wasn't doing anything, ordered him to press the pedal if he didn't want to die. At this time, Cha Ryung finished the game and won, saying how tired he was. He said that he came out just in time, turned to his new friend and asked if he liked the food. After all, the food here is very tasty. The owner is a real master. He admitted that he didn't know that they were the same age. The guy was just tall and had large, pumped-up muscles. He asked him what school he went to. Such compliments made Seokchul Gang blush. But suddenly, a terrifying roar was heard from the street. Everyone in the club started to get up from their seats, not understanding what it was. Was it really an earthquake? The sound was like an explosion. Some people started filming the scene. A truck had crashed into a wall. Some thought the driver had gotten drunk in broad daylight. But how did the truck even get there? Another man who stayed nearby said that they should report it first. And the one who was filming said that there were a lot of people and someone had probably already called. The girl in the red coat was standing on the roof talking to someone. She said she wanted to go to the center of Gangnam, but she couldn't leave now because she hadn't seen the spectacle yet. Her interlocutor said that in a few minutes the alarm would be turned on and hunters would arrive, but the girl was sure that she would not be caught. Suddenly, from behind the roof of the truck, from a small crack, someone's huge hands began to crawl out. The girl said that she woke them up. At this time, everyone who was watching from the side was in complete shock. Huge horned monsters called Horned Terror began to emerge from the truck. The number of horns depends on the growth rate, and the level of danger depends on their number. She asked, "Who bet on 50 people?" And she added that she was also betting that 100 would die before the rescuers arrived. And people began to run away in complete horror. One of the monsters managed to catch the guy and grabbed him right by the head. The person who was filming everything that was happening dropped his phone out of fear when he saw a man being killed. And now a monster is running towards him, but a blue beam flashes past the people. This is Cha Ryung. He is using his power. And he flies towards the monster, swings and kicks. The guy fought off the monster, and it flew back, fell to the floor and began to tremble. He asked the people why they were standing there and ordered them to quickly run away from here. Cha Ryung tried to understand something after seeing these monsters. It seemed like he had seen them before. Before him lay a horned horror, but with one horn. They were not that dangerous. And suddenly he saw a motorcycle flying above him. The guy manages to jump back, and the motorcycle falls to the floor with a very loud sound. It was a diversionary tactic. Now the monster had already stood up and was flying towards him. The guy again skillfully kicks the monster away. The average lifespan of the horned horror is 5 to 6 years. Most of them die with one horn, but a small portion, about 8% of monsters, may develop a second horn, the ability to reproduce, and a longer lifespan. Also, their physical strength is several times greater than that of an ordinary individual. He was fast and strong, but not so much that Cha Ryung couldn't handle him. He would catch him somehow. But there was still a problem with its durability. Compared to that tank, it was 3 to 4 times more durable. At least with the pole, he had working equipment. The monster attacks again and the guy easily dodges. The monster at this time hits the wall with his fist, and it crumbles and breaks. It was another monster, already two-horned, with a higher level of danger than the previous one. Cha Ryung notices a sign on the floor that says "No Entry." Without thinking twice, he takes it in his hands instead of a weapon. And now, in just a few seconds, the monster is preparing to attack again and fly towards him. The guy gets into a fighting stance and activates his magic, holding a sign in his hands. But for some reason, the monster doesn't fly towards him, but jumps over and rushes in the other direction. This surprises the guy very much because he was ready to fight. He sees the monster land next to other people. These were small children who, in complete terror, did not understand what to do and were about to run away, and the monster had already stretched out its paw with claws and was ready to grab them. All monsters have a danger level. The difference between 2 and 3 stars is huge. The destructive power of such creatures alone goes far beyond human capabilities. An ordinary person would simply be torn to pieces by such a monster. Even for highly capable hunters, it would be extremely foolhardy to fight against such without special sliding magic. But there are still exceptions. Seok Chulgong intercepted the monster's attack and now held the monster's fist in his hand. After that, he used his magic and hit the monster in the stomach with all his might. Only a top-ranking tank with outstanding innate qualities could stand up to such a creature. The monster flew back several meters but stayed on its feet and hands using its claws. Chalgang was able to stop him with force, but dealing a fatal blow to a third-rank monster would be extremely difficult. Suddenly, Charyung appeared from behind the monster and asked why the boy was distracted. Charyung used the needle technique and struck straight at the monster's neck. Seok Chulgang watched all this with surprise. The monster received a huge hole in its back and fell down dead. Charyung landed on the ground, sighed tiredly, and looked away. Suddenly, a powerful explosion thundered not far from them, destroying the building and sending debris flying everywhere. Charyung estimated that only less than a minute had passed. Chalgang said it would take at least a few more minutes before rescuers arrived. He heard a distress signal, but this situation was too unexpected. While rescuers were on their way, people could die. Chalgang could have used a provocative cry. This is a basic technique that any tank can use. A technique for attracting monsters with a piercing scream. The guy who dreamed of becoming a hunter was already ready for this. In order for the rescuers to come, it was necessary to distract the monsters. But he could never have imagined that he would risk his life with some guy with whom they had only played computer games together. Chulgang started to say that it might be safe inside the building, but Charyung told him to shout. He reminded him that he was a tank, and he had this scream move that attracted monsters. The guy replied that it was, but it would be very dangerous. Charyung said that he was going to fight anyway, even alone. If he were in Chalgang's place, he would think twice. But he's not alone now. He turned out to be not so bad. He plays well and protects people. How did it happen that he started pretending to be a hunter? But if that's the case, then we need to build it properly. And he asked his friend if he had ever had such a chance, and suggested that he try his hand right now. At this time, all the shelves in the store were on the floor and the goods were scattered. The frightened saleswoman sat under the table, shaking all over. She heard monsters walking around and killing her colleagues. Meanwhile, Seok Chulgang was taking in more air to scream. The monster abandoned the already dead salesman, broke off the tabletop and found the hiding woman. It was at this moment that the tank used a magical shout with all its might. The sound wave passed through a huge part of the city. This was immediately reflected in the ears of the homogeneous monster. The girl in the red coat also noticed this. She didn't understand what was going on. Seok Chulgang got into a fighting stance, preparing to fight. Numerous monsters were heading towards him, some with one horn, others with two. One of the two-horned ones pointed his finger at the guy, and all the one-horned ones immediately ran in his direction. Suddenly, one of the monsters jumped on top of him. But Chalgang skillfully blocked the attack with his elbow, and with his other hand he delivered a powerful blow from which the monster flew back, raising a cloud of dust. One of the monsters was distracted by a strange sound from above. He looked up to see a man jump out of the sky and land next to him. He realized that now he would have to fight only two-horned monsters. But suddenly he noticed movement near the truck, and I couldn't understand what it was. The monster collected the bodies of dead people and threw them into a truck. Now he understood why there were no bodies on the street. It was at that moment that one of the monsters jumped towards him and swung its arms. He remembered discussing with a friend earlier that there was no chance of success with a normal hunt. Seok Chulgang explained that they were both fighting in close combat, and not only did they lack cover at a distance, but they also lacked the proper equipment. It will be a regular team game without the opportunity to give it 100%. And on the contrary, they will interfere with each other. Therefore, it was necessary to distribute tasks correctly. As a tank, he will take on those who are weaker but numerically superior, and Charyong will take on those who are stronger but outnumbered. The guy hit the monster with a stick and jumped aside. He couldn't use the needle technique because this monster lacked magical power. But with this technique, he could have done it in a few hits. But now he only had a conventional weapon, a zinc-coated aluminum road sign, and he couldn't fight with him at full strength. Now the second monster is flying towards him. It wouldn't work the same way, but he already had a rough idea of how to act. Zeke probably fought bare-handed too, except for one or two blows. They're generally not that fast. But he received minor injuries that restricted his movements, like clothes soaked in rain. Charyung punches the monster right in the face. The conditions were terrible. The slightest mistake could cost lives. But, just like before, Charyung used these difficult circumstances to rise another level. And here's another blow. And he knocks the monster off his feet. He somersaults and falls to the side. Charyung remembers the fighting techniques Zeke used and tries to replicate them. This was the first time since his father that he had met a hunter with such power. And here it is, the fourth technique that he managed to master. Rain. He moves with great speed, attacking the monster. He delivers a series of fast and powerful blows. The monster has no time to defend or dodge. Charyung moves like a stream of water, soft and fast, but with crushing power. The final blow, a straight shot to the chest, pierces the monster's scales, and it twitches in its death throes, then freezes. Suddenly, another monster grabs Charyung's leg, and with all his might he throws him to the ground. Something inside is cracking. Blood is flowing from the guy's mouth. He's coughing, shaking all over. He sits, wounded, and his opponent towers before him. Charyung looks pathetic, but there is no other way. After all, it's not a fair fight with a human. At this point, the monster swings to finish him off. But Seok Cheolgang appears in front of him and hits the monster with great force. Charyung, breathing heavily, says that the team's luck is also an ability. At that moment, two men were sitting on a high floor of the building and discussing how incredible it all was. One of them selflessly noted that just the two of them, without any equipment, these guys had laid down more than 10 horned horrors. He was very glad that he was able to film all of this. It was not in vain that he risked his life by staying in this room. It was Seo Dong-yoon, a student and the leader of the Dungeon Investigators Club. The guy sitting next to him was also filming and said he was so scared that his legs went numb. Kim Chang-hyun couldn't figure out who these guys were. They looked younger than him. He himself was also a member of the Dungeon Investigators Circle. Judging by the number of defeated monsters and stars, they are clearly below the gold rank. Perhaps they are studying at the School of Heroes, or they are some super newbies, unknown to anyone yet. However, that was not the most important thing. Dong-yoon asked his friend to edit a short video on his laptop. He wanted to upload it right away, because if you do it later, after the news comes out, it will be too late. He thought the video would get at least 1 million views, maybe 10. Meanwhile, Cheolgang was thinking about his partner. He probably just wanted to stall for time until the rescuers arrived. He didn't expect that the two of them could actually handle it. Charyung noticed that his comrade was standing very beautifully, and it was even awkward to ask him for help. But he still asked to extend his hand and help him stand up. The man did so and asked if Charyung was okay. He replied that, to be honest, everything was not quite right. His whole body ached, although, compared to what he expected, he was still whole. Cheolgang said that Charyung was simply amazing, since he defeated those two single-handedly. Charyung couldn't understand what he was talking about. After all, he himself had laid down 9 monsters, even finishing off the 2-horned one. After that, Cheolgang asked the boy what school he went to. It seems that the rumors are not quite true. At school, they say that everyone else is much weaker than their students. He immediately apologized, explaining that he didn't mean that Charyung's school was bad. That's just what they say. Charyung realized that this guy was also a student at Hero School, although it wasn't surprising considering his abilities. And he asked Cheolgang what place he occupied and how many more of his peers were stronger than him. He replied that he didn't even know, because he wasn't close to the kids at school. He tried his hand at exams several times, but he believes that exams and real abilities are two different things. Charyung thought that the school had too high a standard and that he might get kicked out before he even transferred there. And then he immediately changed the subject to the monster. He asked if the monster standing on the van would continue to stand there. It seemed that he was the only one who could not be provoked. Cheolgang replied that perhaps he was somehow different from others. But if there is something special, it is definitely not in the monster itself. Something important is inside the truck. Cheolgang suggested that they just watch it. He noted that if the monster moved, they would quickly deal with it and it would not have time to harm people. But suddenly something in the truck began to shake and move. A black hand emerged from the hole and grabbed the monster standing nearby by the leg. Charyung and Cheolgang immediately tensed up and took a fighting stance. They saw the monster grab something and pull it into the truck. Charyung realized that the monster was trying to eat its own kind. It dawned on Cheolgang that the horned horrors were tribal-type monsters. The 2 horned individuals were considered the parents and heads of the tribe, leading small groups of 10 individuals. When several tribes united, they became stronger and reproduced faster. There were, however, certain limitations. In the harsh world of the dungeons, the horned horror was considered below average, because the number of individuals has always been regulated by top predators. But at some point, this order was disrupted by the appearance of a mutant with 3 horns. He became not just the leader of a small tribe, but the king of an army of thousands. And here before them stood exactly such a monster. Its body was covered with thick skin, like armor, and 3 horns grew on its head. He immediately noticed someone to the side, 2 guys, and he shot a red beam from his hand, attacking them. The beam flashed between the guys, as both managed to jump to the side. And now this monster was already next to Charyun, holding a red sphere in his hands and preparing to attack. The guy immediately used the flow technique and repelled the attack. However, the enemy destroyed his temporary weapon, a road sign. After this, the blow also hit Charyong himself. The monster hit the guy with his knee right in the stomach. Suddenly, Chalgang appeared and grabbed the 3-horned one. But he immediately noticed how the monster dug his feet into the floor with all his might, causing it to crack. After this, the monster grabbed Chalgan, lifted him into the air and threw him onto the floor with great force. The impact caused the floor to crack and the man felt terrible pain. 2 young guys with outstanding abilities will definitely reach the top level someday. But this moment will not come today. Determination, courage, tenacity. Even if they use everything they currently have, they will not be able to make up the difference with his absolute figures. Charyong, wounded and holding his side, still gets up from the floor and tries to stop the monster. The monster again releases a magical red beam from its hand. He pierces the guy and his whole body is gripped by terrible pain. Suddenly, someone's huge face appears behind the monster. Currently, there was no one who knew exactly what kind of person Yusong was before he lost his identity. The monster turns around in surprise, and there was still no one who could say with certainty what exactly he left behind. 11 years ago, a man made a confession to journalists. He wanted to repent for the mistakes he had made and apologize. This shocked the whole world. 12 hours before the decisive battle with the horned horror, Se-Ram was in real confusion. The truth she had learned last Sunday would not leave her mind. For 2 days, memories and records of past events tormented her. If Charyong's father really had been wrongfully convicted, then she could understand why. After all, he had lost his power. Surely there was more than one person who was aiming for his place. But she didn't understand one thing. When exactly the false accusations began, it all started with victim blaming, materials were presented, witness testimonies, possibly falsified, were simply shocking. However, at the same time, there were contradictions in the media. Even with the fake evidence, Yusong's image wasn't that bad. In her place, she would have fought to the end, trying to prove her innocence, but Yusong did nothing. He admitted everything and did not say a word in his defense. After the press conference, the media calmed down, but in people's memories, the man remained a fraudster. How can this be? Even if he was threatened, admitting his guilt is like adding fuel to the fire and setting himself on fire. Maybe it was her imagination, but there was a very strange expression on his face. It felt like he had to admit his guilt. There must be something else here. And suddenly she caught onto another detail. His biography said he had no family. But what about his son, Charyong? Maybe it's not his real name? But then it would have been stated in the documents, especially since they are very similar. What if Yusong's confession has something to do with his son? At the same time, Charyong was standing outside in the rain. His power was flickering purple, and there was not a single wound on him. He stood there and couldn't understand what was happening to his body. And the monster, without wasting time, activated its power and rushed to attack. Charyong didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. The body continued to move. That was enough. So he struck the 3-horned one. Now the monster had a broken nose from which blue blood was flowing. Charyong used the technique Destruction Rain, striking very quickly and in large numbers. Suddenly the monster stepped back and created a magical wave with its foot, which flew straight towards the guy. Charyun, as soon as the magical wave reached him, managed to duck, and it did not hit. At that moment, the monster appeared next to him and swung its leg to strike. Charyung immediately dodged, his body surrounded by purple magical energy. He used the swell technique and moved towards the enemy with a powerful dash. As if he had become part of the shadow itself, he merged with the air and launched an attack with colossal speed. The blow hit the chest area. The monster flew back as if struck by lightning and crashed into the wall, which shattered into pieces after the impact. The monster has not yet been completely destroyed. However, after two powerful blows from Chaoryong, he became noticeably weaker. All you have to do is hit him in the chin with a road sign and it's all over. In such a state, he could very well have done it. But suddenly the power that had appeared so unexpectedly also suddenly disappeared. He couldn't understand what kind of a lousy coincidence this was. After all, just as he was about to deliver the decisive blow, the power disappeared and the monster managed to jump back. The monster howled in rage, steam coming out of its body. Chaoryong was extremely unhappy that all the power had disappeared somewhere. The monster was already flying towards him, preparing to strike. Suddenly, the same truck he had climbed out of earlier appeared above him. And with a terrible crash, he fell right on top of the monster. Having a position among the hunters is necessary in order to correctly distribute roles that suit each individual. But this was no problem for the horned monster. He instantly flew out from under the truck. And with great force, he struck Chaoryong. Even if a hunter is seriously wounded, he is still able to survive. This is the role and duty of a tank. Sacrifice allows you to gather your last strength and deliver a crushing blow to the enemy. Chaoryong flew towards the monster and used the needle technique, hitting the monster on the head. This was already the task of a close-range fighter. An unbearable pain flashed through the monster's head, and cracks began to appear on his skull. The three-horned man fell to the ground unconscious, and rain fell on him from the sky. Chaoryong helped his comrade up. The hijacking of a vehicle carrying a captive monster resulted in dozens of civilian casualties, and then they saw how the rescue service finally appeared, just in time when the danger had already passed. Less than an hour later, the shocking news spread across the country. But along with it, the popularity of the two guys, or rather, the two heroes, grew. MJ sat there watching their live broadcast and couldn't figure out what the hell it was. They had a huge impact on the world. As a child, little Chaoryong had his elbow wound treated with ointment, but he said there was no need to do that. It would heal on its own. The father replied that this was not possible, and that even a small wound must be treated. If you just leave it like that, it might hurt even more later. The boy then asked when he fights monsters and gets injured, does it hurt, especially when there is a lot of blood? The father admitted that he himself is afraid of such moments. When he is wounded, it hurts, and when there is severe bleeding, it becomes scary. But he endures, because if he doesn't fight, other people may suffer. Ever since he was a child, Chaoryong had one thought constantly running through his head. When he grows up, he wants to become like his father. But at the same time, he realized, though he didn't know the exact reasons, that his father didn't want such a future for him. Every time he told Chaoryong that he shouldn't follow in his footsteps, as if he felt guilty for these words. Perhaps that is why he forbade it. But the boy believed that when he grew up, his father would tell him why he didn't want his son to become a hunter. Now this is impossible. When Chaoryong woke up, he didn't immediately understand what was happening. He lay in the hospital bed and realized that this situation was familiar to him. Something similar had happened to him a few days ago. Suddenly he noticed a man with a knife next to him, and in complete shock he turned around to see who it was. Zeke was sitting nearby peeling an apple and said that last time the guy was to blame. Chaoryong, despite his broken arm, got up from the bed and asked what the man was doing here. Immediately, a strong pain pierced his body, spreading through every cell, and the man said that it would be better for him not to make any sudden movements. The treatment was successful, but recovery from such an injury is usually difficult. He will be able to move his hand in about a month. Now he only needs to think about rest, because there are still many things to do. The guy thanked him for his help and asked if he could ask a question. Zeke replied that if he wanted to know if he knew his father, then yes, they worked together. Suddenly the guy moved his hand sharply, and he snatched the apple from the man's hands, thanked him for it, and asked why he was looking at him like that. Did you really think he was going to hit him? Zeke replied that, to be honest, he expected a different reaction. Chaoryong said that he didn't know what exactly he was expecting, since he just wanted to ask if the man knew his father. Today he is completely different from the last time, and from this we can conclude that they simply did not know him then. Suddenly the guy's face twisted with anger. He started to chase the man away, threatening to cut off his hand with the knife he was holding. Then he calmed down again and asked if the man expected this reaction from him. If this offended Zeke, he apologizes. He replied that everything was fine and that he had almost guessed correctly, although he had expected a more emotional reaction. The guy said that if Zeke had come 2 years earlier, he would have received exactly the emotional reaction he expected, because then his head was filled with thoughts about the people who did this to his father, and about those who saw everything but did nothing. One day he wanted to make them all answer for what they did. Now Zeke asked if the boy didn't think that way anymore. He replied that he couldn't say that his thoughts were completely different now. His priorities had simply changed. No matter how you look at it, it's all too much for him. Even if the man is on his level, he still doesn't measure up. What can he do to make them respond? Now his main goal is to pay for his father's treatment and continue to live until a cure is invented. He threw away the core and added that, although he did not know when he would be able to achieve his goal, he would do everything possible. Even if someone tries to stop him, he will definitely find a way to stop him. Zeke said he wasn't going to interfere. He only came to ask a few questions. Why is Yusong's biological son, Charyung, not registered in official documents? After Yusong's mental disorder, who looked after him? The guy replied that his father raised him alone, and does the man really think that he is the only one who pesters him with such questions? He admitted that he grew up alone. Zeke asked if he had heard of Duganaki. The guy asked what country this person was from. The man explained that this was an inhuman name, the official name of the Dragon of Destruction. It is he who is the source of the poison with which his father was poisoned. Dragons are the most dangerous creatures that still live and rage in this world. Just a few decades ago, all of humanity lived in fear of them. Since their appearance, humans have spent many years, along with other races, building a wall to protect themselves from these monsters. Thanks to the merits of the hunters, dungeons and monsters no longer threaten the safety of people. The exception were creatures that were capable of destroying the erected wall. They were so strong. Such creatures were dragons, monsters that surpassed any race in the world in strength, intelligence, and cunning. Although ancient dragons were rare and hostile to humans, their danger level always remained high. The dragons weren't just disgusted by humans. They perceived them as objects to be dominated and exploited. However, they made a mistake by underestimating the strength and capabilities of the hunters. The dragons believed that there was no need to destroy humanity. People would not cope with the dungeons and would die themselves. They decided to wait until states and society itself collapsed, in order to then breed people like cattle, and play the role of deities in exchange for safety. But the hunters survived and learned to defend the dungeons. When their plan failed, the dragons decided to intervene personally and take over the world by intimidating people with their unprecedented power. That's when Yusong appeared. He became the hunter who proved that dragons could be defeated if the right strategy was used and enough strength was available to implement it. Thanks to him, dragon hunting became successful all over the world and serious changes began. Charyong said that he knew all this himself and added that after that, the dragons simply hid deep in the dungeons. Zeke replied that this was not entirely true. The dragons had changed their tactics. They were very cunning and could take the form of any race. Realizing that they could not defeat people with force alone, they began to change their appearance and dissolve into society. The man shared this secret with Charyong as Yusong's son, and also because he was going to become a hunter. Duganaki is the leader of the dragons that Yusong was chasing until his illness took him down. It is necessary to catch this dragon in order to make a medicine that can cure the father. If Charyong is ready to do this, he must become stronger and rise to the top among the hunters. Zeke will give him a chance to punish Duganaki. Now the hospital bed was empty and quiet. Charyong stood by the window and looked at the cardboard he was holding in his hand. It was a business card with some kind of symbol on it. As he left, Zeke said that if Charyong didn't believe him or couldn't make up his mind, then he should live as if he hadn't heard anything and had forgotten everything. Charyong then replied that if all this was true, then even if participating would threaten him with death, he would never back down. The man replied that it was no longer up to him to decide. He did say that you need to level up to get the right to do this. The dragons of Varna's crane are hiding very deep. They had many years to carefully hide, biding their time. Even if evidence can be obtained and made public, it will be meaningless until they are destroyed personally. Once exposed, they will only hide somewhere again, leaving behind only horror and mistrust. That is why they must be destroyed quickly and sharply. They must not be left with any chance of escape or resistance. You need to strike precisely at the weak spot. In order to catch Duganaki, Zeke began assembling a special team several years ago. All its members are reliable hunters, capable of defeating the dragon. If Charyong's skills aren't enough to fight alongside the others, no matter how much he wants to, there won't be a place for him on the team. Excluding even one member from the plan not only means the failure of the operation, but also puts the entire team at risk. Charyong asked how much time he had, since no one would wait for him alone. Zeke replied that while they had not yet been able to establish the dragon's identity, he had about 2 years. However, it is better to act as quickly as possible. As he himself understands, no one will take into account his personal circumstances if everything is ready. As he left, Zeke said that he didn't care what Charyung thought of him. If he didn't believe Zeke, they might never meet again. However, he can promise one thing. Regardless of whether Charyung joins the team or not, he will still destroy Duganaki. Charyung began to doubt whether this was really the way to cure his father. He was shocked by this sudden and surprising news. Perhaps it was anxiety or fear that he would not be able to take part in the revenge, although this was not yet his final decision. But inside, he already understood that he would definitely be on this team, no matter what it took. He felt joy. He finally had a chance to seize an opportunity that he had not even been able to see before. It was quite possible that for the first time in his life he felt such a strong desire that it filled his heart to the brim. He turned towards the door when he heard the sound. The girl came in and was glad to see that he had already woken up. She asked if his arm hurt or if there was pain elsewhere. He said his muscles were a little sore. The girl said that the attending physician would tell her the details, and at first there might be some slight discomfort in the muscles. They did put his arm back together. When the ambulance arrived, the condition of the arm was very serious. A little more, and Charyong's arm would have had to be amputated. But during the operation, they were joined by a high-ranking healer who managed to reassemble his arm. Charyong asked if he could ask something. He wondered what happened to the guy who was brought in with him. The girl replied that he was discharged that same day. As far as she knew, his recovery rate was quite high. The guy was surprised and even shocked. He wondered how long he had been lying there. He wanted to ask this, but the girl got ahead of him and suddenly asked if she could take a photo with him. Charyong stood in an awkward position and the girl took a selfie. Then he asked if he could be discharged already. The girl answered in the affirmative, but advised not to leave through the main entrance. Because the hospital is full of reporters now. They want to interview him. Charyong didn't even understand why they wanted to interview him. The girl replied that it seemed like he didn't know anything. She showed him the phone screen and asked if it was him in the photo. It was that terrible accident that should not have happened. If it weren't for him and his friend, the death toll could have been in the hundreds. People were going crazy with curiosity, wanting to know who Charyong was. After that, she handed him the bag from Se-ram, adding that if he didn't want to attract attention, he should use its contents and exit through the back of the building. Charyong wondered, could it be that there was equipment with invisibility magic inside? After all, it's different for the rich. But when he opened the bag, he found an ordinary but strong climbing rope. He realized that he would have to escape through the window. With pain all over his body, he climbed down the rope with difficulty. When they parted, the girl told him that he shouldn't worry about the photo, and she added that she would post it when he became a famous hunter. Se-ram was riding in the back seat of the car, looking through her phone, with her bag next to her. Charyong sat down next to her and asked ironically if there really was nothing else to use except the rope. Se-ram replied that it was better that way than letting his identity be revealed. The guy noticed the bag and asked what was in it. The girl explained that his clothes and shoes were there. She determined the size by eye. She also bought a new smartphone because she thought the old one was broken. Charyong hugged the bag and cried from tenderness. The girl sternly told him not to dare cry, and she added that she still can't believe what happened. She doesn't even know where to start and what to ask first. It was amazing that it all happened exactly where he was. She didn't think that such a monster would appear exactly in that place. Charyong replied that life is a chain of events and asked where they were going. He wanted to take a little rest. The girl replied that there was nothing to be done. They only had time today. To get your clothes tailored on time, you need to take your measurements today. She meant the hunter's costume. And she added that he was lucky, because the best high-end tailor shop in the world decided to make armor for him. There are 3 types of suits depending on the quality of the hunter. The first is fabric, that is, sewn from material. Its physical defense ability is at the lowest level. But with the help of various techniques, the fabric is most easily endowed with magical protection. Most often, such costumes are used by healing magicians. The second type of armor is metal. Such suits are very strong. But the problem is their weight. Strong and high-quality metal is difficult to handle. If you don't have outstanding physical characteristics and health, they only get in the way. In the middle between them is leather armor, not too heavy and strong enough. For a ranged fighter like Charyong, he's perfect. The guy said that he himself already understood how unpleasant it is to fight with bare hands. Se-ram asked how he managed to destroy the monster. She wondered how he and his friend managed to catch it. He replied that someone had filmed it, and she could watch the video herself. Se-ram said that the recording only goes up to the middle. It shows how they destroyed the one-horned and two-horned monster. but there is no scene of fighting with a five-star monster. Then the guy remembered that that monster was unusually strong. Even if he and Chalgang were fully prepared for battle, they still wouldn't win. He didn't understand where he got such strength from at that moment. Se-Ram interrupted his thoughts and asked why he was silent. How did they manage to deal with him? Charyong said that he himself doesn't know. It just happened that way. And he has no other explanation. The girl couldn't understand how this was possible. Only professional hunters with full training and a whole squad could defeat such a dangerous monster. Although it doesn't look like he's lying. Could it really be that the two of them managed? She warned that he would not be given a peaceful life. She had already seen the reporters. And not only them. It seemed he had not yet realized that they were both in serious trouble. The second guy has already been fully exposed in the last 3 days. He has already been offered more than one interview and participation in the program. But he never mentioned Charyong. He was asked to at least name his comrade, but he replied that he couldn't without consent. Earlier, when Chulgang was lifting his wounded friend, the friend asked him for something. Charyong asked that if his friend was asked, he would say that he didn't know anything. He didn't want anyone to know his name and face. Chulgang promised that he would fulfill the request. Se-Ram noticed that it seemed like they had become close friends. She said that nothing bad could be allowed to happen until he passed his school exam. At this time, Charyong was texting his boss. He asked him to write as soon as he woke up. Charyong replied that he was fine, had just left the hospital, and they would see each other in the evening. The girl said that she learned a little about this exam. It turned out to be much more difficult than she thought. If you look at the level of competition over the last 5 years, the chance of getting in is 1 in 100. And that only applies to those who actually got in. Charyong said that when you enter, they always scare you with imaginary numbers. In any case, they are all weaker than him. When they got out of the car, the girl added that the interlocutor, of course, did not say anything new. But in terms of his abilities, Charyong is the best, and you can't argue with that. However, he should look at it differently. Do those who lack ability really take such a difficult exam relying only on their own strength? Charyong asked if she meant that they could form groups for the exam. Over the past few years, the majority of those entering the school have come from hunting families. Either one or both parents were hunters. Naturally, their parents knew each other, so they agreed in advance which team their children would be on. Members of such groups among those admitted, especially in the last 5 years, made up 100%. If you try to tell everyone that he is that guy from the news, you will immediately become a target and the main competitor. Charyong said that if their school doesn't provide for this, then it's better to enroll on special grounds, for merit and destruction of monsters. He doesn't need it, even if the majority does it this way. The main thing is that there was at least one who got in on his own. That's enough. He'll definitely make it and get into that school. Se-Ram noted that determination was, of course, good, but it was as if something had changed in the guy. Se-Ram said that she would go first, and when the guy changed his clothes in the toilet, he should come to her. The girl approached the counter and said that she had a meeting with the president. The woman at the table replied that she needed to wait a little. She called the president, but someone else answered. After chatting for a while, she said she would pass on everything as she was told. After apologizing to Se-Ram, the woman said that the president had urgent business today, so he left. The girl couldn't understand what kind of nonsense this was. After all, she had heard that the rest of the time was already booked. The woman began to worry, saying that the president would pay compensation. But in response, she heard that this was not the problem now. In 2 months, I have to take exams for the School of Heroes. How can you cancel the meeting like that, not even reschedule it? Suddenly, a girl appeared, saying that she had seen this face somewhere before. Se-Ram looked at the girl in surprise as she tried to remember her name. Lately, hunters often say that young people have become completely different. While this may be true, the hunters who came later were always in better conditions than their predecessors. They had the tactics of attacking monsters that the first wave of hunters had developed by risking their lives, as well as more advanced equipment and technology. However, the expression, today's youth, meant those who were born in good conditions. The surviving pioneer hunters started families and gave everything they had to their children. It wasn't just about abilities, but also the education they received from childhood. If you ask anyone about the pinnacle of such a benevolent generation, most hunters will point to this girl. The girl stood there and said that the name wasn't that important. The most important thing was to be a first-year student at this school. Her name was Han Ga-yoon. She asked Se-Ram if she knew who she was. She was the student council president of Hero High School. She said that the president of this company was her uncle. He had an urgent matter, so he asked her for help. But she understands Se-ram's dissatisfaction with the cancelled meeting, so she comes up with a brilliant idea. She said that the meeting was not cancelled because of her, but rather that Se-ram simply gave in to her. She gave in to the girl, and for that the girl was grateful. Everyone was a winner. She asked how she liked the idea. Naturally, it was complete nonsense. However, Se-ram understood very well what it meant to hold the position of student council president of the School of Heroes, and also what a terrible character Han Ga-yoon had. Suddenly, Charyung came out of the toilet. He said that it seemed like the girl was from school, and she said that urgent matters came up and there was nothing to be done. Ga-yoon thanked him, but Charyung said that he had to say something. He told her to stop scheming here and get away from them. The woman sitting at the reception desk was in complete shock and fear. Ga-yoon said it was very brave, and she asked who the guy was. Se-ram immediately rushed to save her friend and wanted to justify him. But Ga-yoon only moved her hand slightly and a piercing pain pierced Se-ram's chest. The girl couldn't understand why Se-ram decided to open her mouth. The girl held her chest and was in shock. There was no wound, but she definitely felt pain and did not understand what had happened. Ga-yoon said she didn't remember asking her anything. She should not interfere in other people's business and should sit quietly and silently. Charyong began to introduce himself, saying that he was 17 years old, blood type O, and lived in Seoul, Gwanak District, Bonchon Street. Height, 180, doesn't know weight, doesn't weigh himself. Favorite food, fried rice with sausages and vegetables. He thinks that this is enough, but suddenly he remembers something. The most important thing. He is currently preparing to transfer to the School of Heroes, but now he is a little disappointed. I never thought that in this school there was some kind of scumbag senior student who was hazing like in the army. Ga-yoon just smirked and jerked her hand. Charyung also felt several blows on his body. Ga-yoon said that she was very sorry. She didn't have any particular dislike for people who throw harsh words, although this only applies to those who have the right to do so. And is this guy really preparing to transfer to a school for heroes? She considers it to be some kind of defective product, completely substandard. Suddenly, an attack hits her eye and part of her face disappears like a shadow. Charyung said he just tried to use what he learned. He doesn't know whether the girl liked it or not. But now she stands there, her body riddled with holes. Ga-yoon was very angry but didn't have time to say anything. Suddenly, Han Sung-woo, a former hunter and current equipment designer, came out and asked what the girl was doing. He works, and she came and started arranging concerts for him here, and even decided to answer calls. It didn't take even a week for her to do something bad. Does she really want to see her father turn everything upside down? The man apologized, saying that his niece was used to doing whatever she wanted. Se-ram awkwardly stood up from the floor, saying that everything was fine and there was no need to apologize. If this whole situation happened because of the student council president's stubbornness, then the girl thinks that they can easily solve the problem. Everything is as they say, and even more than that, he adheres to a strict superiority of skills, so if there is someone in front of him who does not have them, he will not even remember his name. Charyung asked Se-ram to come over to him for a minute a little later. He asked what exactly Ga-yoon was doing at school. She didn't seem like she was just a regular samba. Se-ram explained that she was the student council president. In other words, the strongest of all the students at the School of Heroes. Each student at a specialized school receives a temporary license in the form of a starting stone. This license gives students the opportunity to gain experience preparing for professional activities outside of school hours, accompanied by a professional hunter, but only in raids of low difficulty. However, there is an exception. It only exists in the Hero High School Student Council. Within the school, groups of students with exceptional grades are formed and recognized as an unofficial cleanup team. They are the ones who receive the right to independently control and express their opinion on the board of directors. They can also team up with professional teams to take part in raids on monsters higher than 5 stars. Therefore, the Student Council is considered an unofficial team of professionals among hunters, whose members are called future rankers. Charyung realized that she was a third-year student and already the Student Council president, with only a 2-year age difference with him. Se-ram replied that according to the rules it should be like that, but this girl is only a second-year student. She took the presidency from the man who held it before her. The girl said that she was in favor of prioritizing skills. You can become a member of the student council from the first semester of the second year. As soon as Ga-yoon entered her second year, she joined there and immediately pulled out her blade. It was the loudest incident in the entire history of their school. Ga-yoon began to challenge all the senior students who were members of the student council to a fight. As a result, by the end of the first semester, she had defeated everyone, including the president. And so she became the youngest president of the student council. Gayun tells her uncle to stop nagging and says it's time for her to leave. Se-ram is glad that nothing serious happened. Charyung, in turn, offers to make a bet with Gayun. The girl also has some urgent business. They say she's quite a strong student at school. She wouldn't just behave like that with someone younger than her. They decide to make a bet. If he loses, he will give in to the girl. Se-ram was shocked and didn't understand whether the guy had gone crazy and tried to stop him. Gayun replied that if it was a bet, then there needed to be a condition in case she lost. The guy replied that she grasped everything quickly and said that he had heard of a technique called subtracting steps. Step-taking is a basic sparring technique between hunters, based on ancient martial arts techniques. Touching the opponent or dodging is prohibited. The winner is the one who retreats first. If he loses, he will enter into his term. Today, there is no threat of injury in this method. It trains sensitivity and technique. But he says that if the girl loses, she will have to do something. This is one of the training methods that is often used. Next year, when he enters the School of Heroes, he will take the position of student council president. Se-ram realized that he had definitely gone crazy, and she didn't understand where he had learned about such a method. The president would never agree to it if she was in her right mind. Gayun said it was funny and she accepted the bet. And now they are together in the testing room. Gayun and Charyung stand opposite each other in fighting poses. The girl's body radiates a noticeable magical energy. Se-ram was watching these two. Earlier, she tried to dissuade him, saying that it was not too late to refuse. The president is a fairly sensible person, and if he apologizes, then that will be the end of it. It would be one thing if he was healthy. What would he do with such a hand? Even if he wins, no one will give him the position of student council president. Charyung replied that he had no intention of winning, and the girl was very surprised. Even if he was in excellent shape, he still wouldn't have won because Gayun is very strong. Se-ram didn't understand why he had to argue when he knew he would lose. It seemed like a waste of time to her. The guy said that it wasn't quite like that. He understood that the girl was confused, but she just had to trust him. It would be a good exchange. Even though he told her this, he himself did not fully understand what he wanted to achieve in this doomed battle. Or does he want to lose on purpose? But he wouldn't humiliate himself like that. Suddenly, Song-woo appeared next to her. He said that he was speechless and very ashamed. After all, the person who heads the student council is unable to show tolerance and reacts sharply to any word. He bowed to Se-ram and asked for forgiveness. The girl replied that in such a situation he should not apologize. It was her friend who showed stubbornness without any reason, and that is why everything led to such a result. Sang-woo wasn't sure if Charyung had acted without reason. He, of course, did not know her companion, but he felt that he definitely had some purpose. Gayun said that it was already clear, but she would still say it out loud. She would also use only one hand to make everything fair. Charyung replied that it didn't matter to him. If she was preparing to lose, then he understood everything. Literally a second, and the girl disappears from the spot, leaving only a blue light and lightning bolts of light. She ends up next to the guy and kicks him, but he manages to dodge. Se-ram and Sun-woo were surprised, but for different reasons. Gayun didn't tense up for a moment and moved very quickly. Se-ram didn't even notice the moment of impact. She was surprised by the strength of the attack and the speed. The step-taking exercise is a defensive reaction training. In order to touch the opponent, you need to make sure that he does not touch you. However, there was no hesitation or fear in Gayun's movements, only the desire to attack, and her arrogance was accompanied only by speed. Se-ram was shocked at how fast she was and how efficient her movements were, as if there was not a single pause between her strikes. If she were Charyung, she wouldn't have been able to react even to the first blow. She was pulled out of these thoughts by Song-woo. He was a little worried, but he admitted that perhaps he wasn't the first person to ask her such a question. He was interested in Charyung. Was he really preparing to transfer to the hero school? Based on the data and indicators that Se-ram had sent him earlier, he had no doubt that this guy had outstanding abilities. But everything that was happening was much bigger than he could have imagined. He was a brave hunter 10 years ago, so he could immediately understand Charyung's goal. He didn't act out of pride or irascibility, and certainly not in order to humiliate Gayun. He just wanted to check. After all, Gayun's abilities were no longer among the top 10. Once he gains a little more experience, he can easily deal with a low-level ranker. He probably wanted to feel it personally, to know the goal worth striving for. Calculate how much longer he has left to reach this goal. And now the girl attacks again. but Charyung skillfully dodges. She praises him. After all, she hasn't seen anything like this for a long time. Since entering high school, there had never been a time when someone had lasted this long in a battle with her. She didn't think that in such a state he would be able to stand for so long. It wasn't just his arm that was damaged. His movements, his physical strength, everything probably only works halfway now. Charyung asked if she had ever seen him in his normal state. She replied that of course she had seen it. He had moved much faster during the fight with the horned horror. She's been rewatching videos of him for the past 3 days, and she's kind of a fan of the unknown hero, Mr. A. And she suggested that the fight be counted as a draw and postponed until next time. They will have a proper fight when he transfers to their school and is in perfect condition, although she feels too sorry for him to end it all like this. She says that he should go and settle his business with his uncle. But the guy interrupts her, saying that she is very unusual. Is her ability to see unfounded self-confidence? Or is it not self-confidence at all, but an inability to soberly assess the situation? He wasn't going to end the match in a draw. Or had she already forgotten about being the student council president? He won't give up on this idea, so stop wasting time. They must return to the duel. He says he understands everything, but in reality he's bluffing. That's what all three of them thought, looking at Charyong. Even if they continued to fight, he still had no chance. The best chance he could get right now was to finish the fight without taking any casualties. Gayun says she's sorry because she likes brave people. But now he showed not courage but stupidity, and she was even disappointed. Se-ram and Sun Woo noticed that the guy was starting the first attack. His body also emanates blue magic and enormous power. A second later, he appears next to the girl and also attacks her with his foot. Se-ram understood what it was. All this time he was dragging it out, saving his strength. But Sun Woo said that it was not so. He didn't just want to know the difference between himself and Gayun. At best, there were just over 30 blows between them. And between these blows, he completely adopted the girl's movements. This means that winning was not important to him from the very beginning. His goal was different, to steal Gayun's equipment. The girl was surprised by such fast attacks but still dodged. Charyung was involved in smuggling since he was a child. He understood how to dodge, and so no matter what happened, he had only one rule. Covered in sweat, he stood and told the girl not to freeze. He wanted to see even more techniques. He never made deals that were unfavorable to himself. Technique is not just a punch with power put into it. In order to put all your skill into a strike and really hit the target, the most precise poses and movements are necessary. Also, don't forget about breathing. It is necessary to track every step, even the most insignificant one. It takes time to learn all these elements. Some people devote years to this, going through successes and failures and learning from them. This experience is passed on to the next generations, improving each time. And even the most talented genius is not able to achieve all this alone in a few years. Thanks to his outstanding qualities, Charyung was able to achieve amazing growth. But at the age of 17, when his physical development stalled, he finally hit a wall that prevented further development. To move on to the next stage, he had to break down this barrier. The guy removed the bandage that held his broken arm in the air and stretched his shoulder. And he asked Gayun why she doubted. Did she really not hear his words? He would definitely enroll in the hero school, and they would meet again. If he were her, he would gladly help the future Hubi. Although she is most likely afraid of losing, he understands her. Gayun suddenly smiled and turned to her uncle, remembering that he had a request for her. He asked her to at least take one look at the units that wanted to sign a preliminary contract with her. She of course doesn't care, but she will fulfill his request if he doesn't stop her. Sun Woo didn't understand what she was going to do. The girl asked if he really wanted to see how to dodge, and she will actually do it, so that all he has to do is evade. Charyung looked around in surprise, trying to figure out which side he would be hit from. Having calculated the movement, he dodges. There are connecting elements in human movements. Every movement at every moment in time has a beginning and an end. Therefore, observers subconsciously guess what the next action will be. Han Ga-yoon used a technique that targeted precisely this moment. She skipped the intermediate stage, thereby deceiving the observer's vision. She didn't just move in a way that made her next move impossible to predict. She made her opponent feel her speed. This was the same technique that her father had invented and brought to life more than 20 years earlier. It was this technique that brought him fame. Charyung, preventing the attack on himself, immediately used the spell Flash. Seong Woo, seeing that the boy had used the technique twice, was shocked. He had not just repeated the technique, but had used the same method that Ga-yoon had not even had time to fully demonstrate. He admitted that Cha Ryong had understood the essence of the technique in such a short time. But Flash could not be repeated once its principle was understood. Flexibility, lightning-fast reactions, and, most importantly, a sense of timing are required. If even one of these elements is missing, the technique will fail. The man himself first used the Flash when he was 20 years old. He adopted it from his brother. This was the age when all physical and mental indicators are at the highest level. But even he needed 3 months to just understand the technique. And Cha Ryong adopted her technique right during the fight with Ga Yun, and managed to master it even in that state. Han Sung-woo was right. Cha Ryong was in terrible shape. Considering everything he had been through, his strength was almost gone. But despite this, the guy's internal state was better than ever before. He decided that he could become much stronger. Now he felt real joy from learning something new, something he had never known before. Even though this training was not familiar, it gave him a purpose and an incentive to grow. And along with this, an understanding of how one can achieve this. He didn't need it so much as he rejoiced at the very opportunity to fill the voids inside himself. For the first time, he felt not just a chance, but a real joy from the sense of a path and progress. He even forgot about fatigue. Gathering his last strength, the boy prepared to attack. Ga Yun jumped back at this time, but he had already rushed forward. He seemed to flare up in the air. His body moved with incredible speed and ease. He spun in the air, cutting through space with his legs. The wave from these attacks cut through the air, with a roar and vibration, reaching all the way to Se-ram. Song-woo immediately became alert, preparing to rush to help. But his niece stopped him, reminding him that she had asked him not to interfere. And so, a moment later, Cha Ryong was lying on the floor, exhausted and weak. Ga Yun, noticing this, sighed with relief. Everything was over faster than she expected. She admitted that she lost. At the same moment, Cha Ryong also said that he had been defeated. There was an awkward silence. There was no winner. Ga Yun didn't understand what he was talking about. After all, she had said in advance that she would only use one hand. Cha Ryong calmly explained. She did it of her own free will, and he hadn't expected any leniency from the very beginning. Ga Yun realized that she should probably feel ashamed. No one forced her to do this. She decided it herself. But there was no need to dramatize. After all, she is not that strong. Seong-woo intervened, noting that this was not a case where victory or defeat should be hidden. To a greater extent, the responsibility lay with him, as an adult. He had to stop the fight. It was obvious from the start that in this state, it would be extremely difficult for Cha Ryong to win. He suggested that the fight be considered a draw, and that the real battle be held later, when Cha Ryong had fully recovered. Suddenly, Ga Yun stood over the boy, her face full of anger. She warned him. The next time they would meet, it would be at the School of Heroes. And if he failed the entrance exam, he would be in trouble. And if he dares to lose to someone else before they meet, she will not leave him alone. For Cha Ryong, regardless of the outcome, this fight was a most important and valuable experience. Today was the first time he met a peer with such mature, almost seasoned abilities. Ga Yun approached Se-ram and asked her name, and she obediently answered. Seeing a worthy opponent in front of her, whom Cha Ryong would definitely have to defeat one day, she asked Se-ram if she was his assistant. She didn't know if Se-ram had the ability to hunt, but from the looks of it, the girl wasn't a complete failure. Today, it wasn't just Cha Ryong who felt the joy that filled her heart for the first time. Ga Yun noticed that the girl was quite good at understanding people. Se-ram and Cha Ryong were sitting on the sofa. The guy was very tired. He said how bad he felt and that it seemed like he was going to die. Se-ram was surprised that he wasn't taken to the hospital at all and asked if someone was forcing him to do all this. However, the outcome of the battle was unexpected, especially the fact that he himself admitted his defeat. To be honest, she thought he won, even considering the rule he had set himself. After all, the student council president had used her hand. Cha Ryong said that if we talk about the rules, he won. But given that he had taken off his bandage and was back in the fight, it was clear that the two of them weren't just going to lightly batter each other. However, it was he who crossed the line. Se-ram realized this and noticed that at some point he changed. He put all his strength into his last blow. If he had hit the girl, it would have been more than just pain. Even though he was kicking, he knew he wouldn't hit her. Even if he had used his hands in such a situation, it would have been inevitable and, as he believed, fair. Se-ram wondered what would happen if they both fought in perfect condition. The guy didn't answer directly. She had already asked him why he had gotten into a fight in the first place. but he seemed to be completely immersed in the battle itself. He even enjoyed it. Suddenly, he jumped up from the sofa, noticing that someone had arrived. There were two figures standing at the threshold. One had a bag, the other had boxes in his hands. It was Song Woo with the courier. He asked how long they had been waiting. Pizza boxes, Coca-Cola, snacks, and sauces were laid out on the table. Sun Woo apologized to the guy, saying that his niece may have caused him trouble, but he should still treat him to something delicious. Cha Ryong thanked for the pizza. He wasn't used to expensive food. The main thing was that there was a lot. After all, the calorie expenditure of hunters, especially melee players, is at least 5 times higher than the norm of an ordinary person. Se-Ram noticed that he ate the entire box in 2 minutes. However, he hadn't eaten anything during those 4 days of unconsciousness. Xiang Wu changed the subject. He said that he had to give them something earlier. Their workshop does not work with leather. They use fabric that is much better than hers. This fabric is not made from plant fibers, but from the threads of high-risk monsters. The clothes are made using special technologies for which the workshop has permission. The materials are mixed in different proportions depending on the user's characteristics. Once the coating is complete, the resulting fabric is much stronger and lighter than leather. In Cha Ryung's case, they had already made a plan of what clothes to make and in what proportions. Besides, his data was already in the laboratory of the Chinsen Group Corporation. The most important thing is that Song Woo personally checked it today. However, there was one detail that was bothering him. As he already said, the final stage of fabric creation is coating, the process of impregnating with oil and increasing the strength of the material. Se-Ram said that she had heard about it before, and that was why she asked Sun Woo to make the best coating, regardless of the cost. But the man replied that it was currently impossible to find oil of the highest grade. Deep-sea whale oil is commonly used. It is extremely difficult to obtain, but they had an exclusive supply contract. However, due to a sudden abnormal phenomenon, the hunters were unable to catch a single whale. Of course, there are alternative materials, but despite the slight difference, it cannot guarantee exactly the same efficiency. And this already means a violation of the terms of the contract, a mistake that should not have happened. If they decide to refuse their services, he will understand. If they refuse, he can introduce them to a master with a high level of skills. He makes the armor using standard methods, and of course Song Woo will bear all the costs of making it. But Cha Ryung interrupted him, saying that it didn't matter to him. If he claims that the difference is almost imperceptible, then even more so since he has never used expensive equipment. The most important thing is that he wants to wear clothes that were made by Sun Woo. After all, he is the very teacher who taught his niece fighting techniques. He is not sure about the equipment itself, but wants to use something made by the hands of a strong man. Se-Ram supported him, saying that if the guy thought so, then it didn't matter to her either. After all, today was a strange day. Song Woo was surprised to hear himself called a strong man. He had not been a hunter for over 10 years, and he felt a little embarrassed to hear such words. Although, of course, it's nice. He agreed and promised to produce the best quality product for him to justify his trust. After that, he began to regret more and more the events of the previous week. There was a big hunt that he was really looking forward to and had high hopes for. He wanted to get the materials that he had long dreamed of trying out. He asked if they had heard of sky wasps. Se-Ram replied that she had heard of royal jelly, and that it was a very valuable trophy. The man explained that jelly does exist and is the most well-known, but there is another material that is considered a real gem among armor makers. This is black wax, black beeswax, which is produced by heavenly wasps. While royal jelly nourishes the queen, black wax protects the already adult queen. Even among wasps, there are only a small number of those who are able to produce this material, with which they lubricate the body of the queen. If we could coat the material with this wax, we would have a first-class product. Cha Ryung showed the man his phone and asked if it looked like this. He had a photo, but his phone was broken, so he just drew a slightly thick black object. Song Woo was surprised to hear that the boy had a photo. Did he really see a celestial wasp in real life? At this moment, Cha Ryung suddenly remembered that he had smuggled out the goods and could be held accountable for it. He hastened to say that he saw this thing at Se-Ram's house. After all, rich people are different from ordinary people. They have so much. MJ called Cha Ryung and said that he was currently in the hospital and had no business today, so he wanted to visit someone before he arrived. He asked if the meeting would take about an hour. Cha Ryung agreed, saying that he would also be free by that time. MJ asked if the boy was full. He replied that he had eaten, but if MJ was hungry, He would keep him company. MJ asked what if he offered to chip in. Charyung jokingly replied that he might get indigestion then. The man decided it was time to end the conversation because someone had come in. He asked to call when the guy arrived. Zeke came to him. It was with him that he had arranged a meeting. Zeke greeted the man, noting that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. MJ asked if they could leave the room. The man lying on the bed had just recently taken a sedative and fallen asleep. Moreover, this is a hospital and you can't make noise. 11 years ago, the so-called legendary cleanup squad, led by one man, was disbanded. Zeke Esserm is currently ranked 7th in South Korea. He was a former healer for the Venus squad. He said that if the man didn't make any noise, they would finish quickly. MJ noted that his manner of speaking was still as irritating as before. Now the two who once called each other comrades met again. MJ admitted that Zeke was right, but added that he couldn't help but make noise. He smashed his phone in anger. With sarcasm on his face, he said that he was so happy to see his face after 10 years that he thought he was going to go crazy. Im Jae-hwan, a former hunter, was ranked 5th in South Korea in the past. He was the main fighter of the Venus squad. Se-ram and Charyung went outside. The girl was shocked by how much the guy scared her with that black wax. She wondered if this thing had been in that very chest when they first met. And she said that next time he should warn her in advance about such things. You can't scare a person like that. The guy replied that he himself did not know what this object was and thanked her for playing along with him. Se-ram said that he can't sit still. And still, he's bound to get into trouble. But suddenly she received a call from Zeke on her phone. She said she would be gone for a while. At that time, Charyung texted and asked if he needed to come to the hospital. Someone came out to them and said that it was getting colder outside. Sun Woo noted that it was only September, and if it was already this cold, then the year would be cold. Charyung said that Se-ram received a call from someone and she stepped away for a while, thinking that it would take a little time. The man admitted that he did not come to talk. He remembered the unusual move the guy had shown today. It was a real breakthrough. This technique was invented by his brother, Ga Yun's father. He also had a hand in perfecting it. Suddenly, Charyung bowed and apologized. He said that he had used the technology, created with sweat and blood, without permission and should have thought about it earlier. He apologized for accepting it without permission and promised that it would not happen again. Sun Woo said that he didn't want to talk about techniques for that reason, and it seems that Charyung misunderstood him. Hunter techniques don't have copyrights. Of course, there are almost no cases when such techniques are passed on to everyone. But if a person has managed to master it himself, it is not considered a crime. If someone can easily spy on and adopt a technique, it means that they had a fairly high level to begin with. However, the guy admitted that his movements were still not exactly the same. Sun Woo said that Charyung didn't have any experience learning any techniques properly. At first, he thought that he only knew the basics. But during the battle, looking at his face, he came to the conclusion that the guy with such an expression could not possibly have mastered only basic techniques. He does not dare ask how and why he learned this, but he would like to give one piece of advice, hoping that it will be useful. He has a real talent. It is worth the effort and time to develop this talent, and it will certainly sparkle brighter than the rest. It won't be difficult for him to enter the school of heroes and become the best hunter. Speaking of his personal skills, in their world, especially in the world of hunters, no one would just rejoice at someone's success. Of course, many will recognize his abilities and look up to him. But there will be many who will be jealous. They will want to get this talent, and if they fail, they will destroy it. Perhaps Charyung himself doesn't understand this yet. He asked the man why he advised him to hide his talents so as not to attract the attention of dangerous people. Sun Woo lit an electronic cigarette and replied that he didn't mean that at all. Why would he hide his talents? Besides, such skills are simply impossible to hide. Because of his unnatural modesty, he may, on the contrary, be perceived as weak. He tapped the guy on the shoulder and said that he better show his abilities in all their glory. He must be someone who is a genius and not easy to befriend. He must do everything he can while his strength allows, and accept any techniques that come his way. If someone makes a claim, he should not apologize as he just did. On the contrary, he should behave confidently and with dignity. After all, it is not he who is to blame, but those who demonstrated this technique. Only he himself can decide whether to do the right thing or not. To be more precise, the right to choose belongs to the one who is stronger. Even if he spied on the technique, if he uses it correctly and can rise to higher levels, from that moment it will become his personal technique. The man understands how Chaoryung feels. This is not the kind of advice an adult should give, but humans live in a world of hunters, where the strongest survive. He saw how sharp his niece's character was. As an adult, he should reprimand her, but he doesn't want to break her by force. Tough genius. As long as people around her are afraid of her, they can't look down on her or harm her in any way. Same with Chaoryung. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by Se-ram. She tells the guy to pick up the phone and notices that the director is also there. Chaoryung doesn't understand why he should answer her calls. The girl hands him her phone and says that it is her uncle. He knew that she brought Chaoryung here and asked if he was nearby, asking her to pass the phone. The boy put the phone to his ear and said he was listening. Zeke apologized for interrupting his studies. He didn't want to call, but something unexpected happened and asked if Chaoryung could come over as soon as possible. He told him what happened and the guy was in complete shock. After this, he immediately announced that he was leaving immediately. They come to the entrance to the descent down together with the girl. The girl asks if it is true that there is a secret passage to the dungeon here. Chaoryung replies that it's not just here. There are secret passages in the abandoned subway, and each passage has its own owner. They notice Zeke and some other guy who says that Chaoryung came earlier than he thought. Zeke says he didn't plan to call him here, rather than heal and carry Chaoryung on himself. It would be better to die right away. The guy thought he didn't know what kind of relationship they had, but they didn't look very friendly, and it seemed to him that the two were fighting. The stranger replied that if he had known that Chaoryung would come so quickly, he would have at least asked him to bring him a t-shirt. He came closer to Chaoryung and said that he also had a lively look. He was the same one who had punched Zeke in the face earlier. The guy is quite famous in their squad, although they don't even know his name. They call him a teenager who is scarier than high-level monsters. He added if Chaoryung knew that their leader wanted to meet him and was probably already looking around in advance. Zeke interrupted their conversation, saying that they had to leave. The business was over, and it was not a good idea to stay in this place for too long. Zeke and Se-ram go up the stairs to leave. The girl tells the guy to call her later. Chaoryung approaches the huge doors with hieroglyphs and opens them. He said he thought it was about support, as if his director had some serious condition. MJ sits in front of the cliff and says that he is in a really serious condition. His body and self-confidence are just shattered. He said how pathetic Zeke was, following him so obediently. After all, he wasn't alone. And just in case, he asked if Chaoryung had a lighter. He replied that he didn't carry one. The boy noticed the sunset but didn't understand. Had the sun really not set yet? He approached MJ. The man pointed down into the cliff and told the boy to bring him a lighter from there because he was so tired that he couldn't move. Chaoryung stood there in horror, unable to understand what he had done. Were they fighting? MJ asked if Zeke had said they had fought. He was so upset that he actually wanted to set him on fire. He added that the boy was a good fighter. He wasn't even a tank, but he held the line well. In 10 years, he would become a great hunter. Chaoryung came closer to him and said that he had something important to say. MJ already understood what he was talking about. If he wanted to quit smuggling, then he would allow him to. But if it was to become a hunter, then he had one condition. He has 1 month to master what MJ teaches him. If he fails, he'd better give up on his idea of becoming a hunter. This will not be easy as it is different from his current skills. MJ is going to teach him magic.